What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 170 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where three best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Messi, joined today by my very good friends and co-hosts, Mr. Steven Radford.
Hello, hello.
And Mr. Max Wright.
Howdy. Sorry, I blanked.
God, if you guys are audio listeners, I just watched a man buffer in real time. I'm a little worried that Max might be a Terminator now, but at least he's been reprogrammed to play video games. So I guess we're okay.
Yeah.
Hey,
no, I'm a kindergarten cop.
Can I get a drum roll? I know I'm the drummer, but can I get a drum roll? It's time for Game of the Year, everybody! Let's go! Game of the Year 2024 is here. After years of lobbying, Steve has successfully pushed Game of the Year to the very end of January. Look at that. He did it.
It's great. And how many games did you use that month to play, Steve?
You know what? None. It's great. Yeah. But you know what? I think we're right on the money. We're in great company with the Oscars, with the BAFTA, all sorts of prestigious events, you know? And the FlipScreen Games Game of the Year deserves to be among that company.
I think so.
Oof, that feels like a backhanded compliment a little bit, but that's probably because I have so little respect for the Academy Awards. But that's fine.
Okay, but the BAFTAs, everyone likes the video game.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. The BAFTAs are respectable.
I'd rather be the BAFTAs than the Game Awards, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough. So I am very excited for this episode. This has been a long time coming. I know Max has put in just so much prep this year, and I'm very interested to see which of the 30 games that I know that you played ended up on the list. So if this is your first game of the year with us, we'll just quickly run you through how we do things here. We each have our own personal list of games. We're going to go round robin style and each kind of name, each game on our list from the lowest on the list all the way up to number one. And depending on where the game ranks on your list, it's assigned a point value that will then be tallied at the end of the episode, and we'll name our game of the year that way. So you'll get, each of our individual favorite games of the year, and then we kind of are able to, through math, decide which, much like the Oscars, right? It's not necessarily the game of the year. It's the game that everybody liked probably the middlest amount, or the game that everybody that appealed to the most of us, right? Like that sort of thing.
May I make a suggestion?
Yeah, of course.
As we said, we probably should have spoke about this off mic, unless we did and I wasn't listening, but we said we go round robin. Now, we know that Steve doesn't have 10 games, but we do. So is it going to be us two for the first 5, and then Steve comes in around the back and fills in?
Yeah, that's how we're going to do
fine.
it. Yeah.
Cool.
So I'm used to doing it next.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Normally we have top 10s, but Steve played less games this year, so he's got a top 5 for us. And Max and I will ping pong back and forth until we get up to the top 5. That's how we'll do things.
Perfect.
Just to give you an idea, I guess, of the scale, if you're interested, at a 10, you get 1 point. At 1, you get 10 points. It's a pretty simple little system that we cooked up here. So, Max, because you had the honor of winning the Storied and Bessie Trophy on last week's show, the winner of our 2024 predictions, another round of applause for this year's champion.
Thank you very much. I look forward to winning this year as well.
I hope you will carry the title with the same grace that I did.
When have you ever done anything with grace?
That's what I mean. I hope you'll be a villain,
What was that comment? I'm bastard lost or something that we got on the YouTube video last week?
Yeah.
It's nice to have supporters,
So funny. Oh, man. Hey, you strike me down now, I'll only become more powerful than you could ever imagine. So there we go. Because you won last week, why don't you take the honor of naming our first game?
Sure, absolutely. So my number 10 game of 2024 is Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2.
Cool.
Space Marine 2 is a game that I was hoping was going to come out in 2023. Waited very patiently for it in 2024. had a good time with it. It looked incredible. It played fantastically. It was just like simple fun. It didn't want to be anything different, or it didn't want to like be one of those games where it's like, oh, we have to please all the crowd. So here's a little bit of crafting. Here's a little bit of this. Here's a little bit of that. It was just run, gun, shoot things. It looked incredible. Highly recommend giving this one a shot. Looking forward to the DLC whenever that does come out.
I think that I didn't play the game, but like I do think that your description of it is like really cool. It reminds me of like a through line I feel like I've seen a little bit this year of like these games that come out that are a little smaller budget, like little smaller team, more focused, less broad, and that have like come out to really great success. And it's cool to see that. Like it feels like a kind of AAA, AA game, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
you know,
games,
like,
all games want to be homogenous now, don't they? They all want to be like, they all need to please enough people to make just enough money. Whereas this targeted at doing what it was doing. I would say it's even more laser focused than the first Space Marine was, if I'm being honest with you.
Which is good. I love the idea of spending less to focus more.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
But also it found more success through that as well. So totally. It's, it focused on an audience and it got its success, and it just proves that games don't need to be a little bit of every, that a little bit of something for everyone thing that people rip on in reviews is absolute. I think it's correct, like as in to rip on it, because a little something for everyone, that how do you make good art if it's for everyone?
Jack of all trades, master of none, right?
Exactly.
You'd rather have a game be excellent at one or two things than like okay at like a dozen.
Yes, which was now not to target any game particularly, but Spider-Man 2 last year I felt very much had like a lot of like, oh, you get all the collectibles, or you have a skill tree, or you have this, or you have that, and it did a lot of everything okay, a lot of like mini games and stuff, but didn't do the only thing it did particularly well is the thing it didn't then like do a lot of in the game, which was the traversal and that. Whereas I think, if they had a laser focus on things, then it could have been more like this. But anyway, that was it. Space Marine 2. Speaking of 10s, Pete, what's your 10?
Speaking of 10s, I am a 10. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Very welcome.
So my 10th game of the year is Pokemon Trading Card Game Pocket.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So this was one I feel like maybe not every year, but like I feel like usually there's like one of these like goofy little mobile type games that like sneaks on my list because it ends up occupying a good niche for me, right? Because I think broadly mobile games are like not my jam, right? Like I don't usually gravitate towards them. I hit a lot of walls with, like paywalls and things like that being a barrier to like fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there are these like games like this, like Marvel Snap was like this for me before that, and when you kind of hit that right balance, right, where it's like this is a game that does not demand a ton of your attention for you to engage with it, so it's like a really great like way for you to kind of, or for me anyway, right, in my gaming diet, it hits like a really nice specific place, right? Where like if I'm out and about or whatever and I want to kill a minute, I can jump on and do a quick battle or something like that, and that's great. But like the core loop that I've really gotten into is like the same way I was with Pokemon cards in real life, which is the collecting aspect, right? And the fact that like there's kind of a ceiling on how much money you could even invest to open more packs of cards. There's kind of like a limit to what you can do in a day, right? It has never made me feel incentivized to spend money. I've spent $1 on the game, and aside from that, it's like how
do you get cards then if you're not spending money?
So you open 2 free packs a day. You have like a timer. Sorry, you cut out there. What's that, Steve?
Your audio's gone.
You're muted. Sorry.
I'm muted?
Oh, okay.
You're back.
Now we got you. Go ahead.
I'd be hooked on slicing those packs open every day. I've seen the animation and it looks
it's
gorgeous.
very satisfying.
It's really nice.
I wasn't getting anything good out of it, which is why I stopped playing. Like there wasn't that feedback. Like I was seeing where friends were like sending, "Oh, I got this cool shiny card," and I'd be like, "All right, I'll go in the game." And I would just get a load of stuff I've already got, and I'd be like, "Okay, cool." And eventually, I just dropped off it because I wasn't getting that. I guess it's sort of like a gambling thing or a loot box thing where we're like, "Ooh, what's inside the mystery box?" And if inside the mystery box is shit and paper, I'm not interested. But if it's like shiny, ooh, cool. And I feel like for me, I wasn't drawn in by that, but that's also probably just down to bad luck as opposed to the game not doing that on purpose, you know?
Yeah, I totally get what you mean. And I think like that comes down to the luck of the draw with games like this, where it's like, I think it's super easy to have a good experience or be frustrated, you know? I've been fairly lucky. Like I haven't had the most luck with pulls, but I think I've had enough carrot that it's kept me on the line. And yeah, it's just
the packs you buy and the ones you get free the same, or are you more likely to get a shiny in the ones you buy?
Nope. Yeah, it's all the same. And like the only thing, the way that it works is basically you get a pack every 12 hours and you can have a max of 2 stacked. So if you log in every day, you can open those 2 packs. And then the currency that you get is like, it's called gold. And basically there are a bunch of like non-paid currencies, right? That like you can use to do things like open another pack of cards, right? And that is based on how many hours are left on your timer. So if you just opened a pack, it's 12 points to open another one immediately. Or like if it's say like, oh, I'm about to go to bed and my timer's going to go off in like 3 hours, I could spend 3 points, get the pack now, and then when I wake up, it'll be time to open another pack. So it's like there's a little bit of metagaming it where you can kind of find ways to like maximize when you're opening packs to open more packs for less currency. But if you buy the gold, like you can only use that as the like other types of currency to a certain amount a day. So you can't literally just be like, I'm going to put in $100 and just slam open packs. Like it's like you're going to hit an artificial kind of ceiling every day. And then you could like use that over time, that the gold that you had paid for. So it's like, I'm not saying that there isn't an advantage to spending money. I think honestly, the biggest advantage is to get the like premium pass where you get to open a 3rd pack of cards a day, which is, that's really nice. But yeah, so point being, I really like collecting Pokemon cards, and I refuse to do it as an adult because it's like literally I joke with my friends that do it. I'm like, you're asking me to like smoke crack. Like it's a thing that I know I will get addicted to. I will spend too much money on, and I'll end up with a ton more stuff in my house that I don't need. Right.
And you have to engage with the scalpers as well, which is a big problem with modern Pokemon card collecting, you know.
Sure. Yeah. So what I really like about this is like it lets me scratch that like childhood itch of like slamming open Pokemon cards, packs of Pokemon cards, right? And like hunting for things to fill in my binder, or, you know, like engaging in events to get like a promo card that you can only get if you do this thing this week. And like it has enough going on that like every time I want to log in and do something in the game, there's something quick for me to do. And like I get that little hit of like, yeah, cool, like I'm filling up my card, my binder of cards. But it doesn't like, it's not constantly being like, but wouldn't it be better if you were spending money? Wouldn't it be better? You know? And it's like I don't feel like it's constantly trying to ask me to open my wallet. It's like very much like there is a perfectly comfortable, healthy loop based on timers, and most other mobile games don't feel like that to me. And also, I'm biased, right? Like, I'm a Pokemon guy, and I want to collect Pokemon cards. So, like, yeah, it's not a perfect experience. They just rolled out trading in a new update, and it's bad. It like, the cost of doing it is, like, way too... It asks too much of you, right? Like, and there are a ton of things that they can and need to improve on. But the game has, I think, been really successful. It's had like a lot of downloads. I don't know how many people are spending money on it, but yeah, I think it has.
It had the Pokemon Go effect of like people who hadn't played Pokemon in years, or of my friends who hadn't had, you know, don't engage in mobile games very often, were like sending screenshots in group chats of like, hey, I just got this, and they were checking every day, and they were opening their packs and stuff. And even in a way that I wasn't that bothered, but people were posting, and I was like, oh, this is surprising that they're playing something.
Like Sierra's been streaming it and stuff, you know, and like I've got a group chat with my friends who are playing it, and we're like keeping up with our collections and stuff. So yeah, it's that community element of it has been overall it's been a really fun experience. And since it came out while I was on vacation back in October, if you guys remember. I downloaded it while I was on vacation, and I've literally logged in and played every single day. And I don't spend a ton of time every day, right? There's some days where I might sit and do battles for like an hour or two while I'm watching TV or something like that. If there's like an event going on, if I'm trying to achieve something. But otherwise, it's like I think is like the perfect like that way that I feel like Animal Crossing gets like once you're in the loop, where it's like, yeah, this is like a jump in, jump out. It's part of your diet that day, not necessarily a game that demands.
If
hours
only
of your
Animal
attention.
Crossing hadn't come out during a lockdown, then it may become that for me. But I was consumed because I had nothing else to do.
Yeah.
I'm sure the amount of time we all dropped into that game because it became our days. It became our entire lives for that sort of.
It's the only way to socialize.
Yeah. It was like lightning in a bottle. Like, it's crazy that it came out when it did.
Yeah. What's your number 9, Max?
My number 9, inside number 9, is a game that we featured a lot on this channel last year, which is Ultros.
Nice, cool.
Yeah, we reviewed it. We did some videos on it, and it just really stuck with me. It was a really fun. It was like an interesting Metroidvania with like time loopy elements, and what was sort of promised in there was that basically it was like a time looping Metroidvania with a really psychedelic visual style. But only when I sort of like got to the end of the game and realized there was like a second hidden game spanning puzzle. And I really got to put the time into, because I was playing it before launch, there was nobody to ask. There was no one to sort of confer with. There was no guides on the internet. So I was sort of like really racking my brains, working out how the different things where you could collect seeds from enemies or on the floor. You could plant them in places. You could then fertilize them. They all grew in different ways. They all behaved in different ways. You could like cut bits off of one plant, stick it to another plant, and then grow that. You could sort of string plants off each other. You could create new planting spots, blah, 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 because you needed to create a network that spanned from like the very center of the ship, because there's like a signal that was isolated. You had to spread that across the entire ship by planting and cultivating and connecting these sort of signal boosting flowers that grow on these plants, and that like was arguably more interesting and more did more for me than the main game of like the fighting the bosses and unlocking all the bits, blah blah blah. That was rewarding for me, and that has stuck with me all year really, of like, oh, wasn't that great that I got to engage with it in a way that wasn't spoiled by anything, and there was no like, oh, I got frustrated so I look up a guide. It was it is yeah I could just think about it, and I worked it out, and I just it was just really satisfying. And I think that even though I've just explained a lot of it and we had done videos on it, I still think that there is beauty in playing it, and the game is a incredible looking game. There are loads of different endings, and there's a good soundtrack to it. When you sort of work things out, how things work, it's just a really nice game, and I'm really glad we got to review it. It's one of those games that I think is always going to hold a special place for me, because I'm pretty sure it was the first game we actually reviewed on the channel, and we I put a ton of work into it. And yeah, really enjoyed Ultros. Neither of you guys picked it up or played it, did you?
No, I didn't know.
I think we gave the second copy away, didn't we?
So I'm pretty familiar.
Yeah. But yeah, that was a in a game that like you said, I played a lot of games last year. And that one really shone for me.
I think its art style really stands out. Like it's a very striking game for sure.
Yes, yeah. Even when you're, it has like cutaways when you're in the game and you're playing it, it looks one way, and then it will cut to like not a cutscene per se, but like a short image of a piece of art or something. It will scroll down, and that looks slightly different, but still in the same style. It's sort of like in SpongeBob when it goes from like the normal SpongeBob to the close-ups, and it's all really detailed and growth and stuff like that. It sort of does things like that. Yeah, just a really striking game to look at, and then also surprisingly like serene, and like you spend time thinking about it as much as you do looking at it. Yeah, really special game.
Well, my number 9 shares the fact that it is an extremely stylish and striking game, but otherwise it is pretty polar opposite in terms of vibe. This was Mullet Mad Jack. So this was that Max and I talked about on the Steam Deck podcast when it was at Steam Next Fest, and then it ended up coming out later in the year, and I really dug this game. And it's a game I'd like to even spend more time with, and I think it's like perfect for that kind of like, again, like jump in, jump out experience, because it is a roguelite. It's a like old school first person shooter, like a kind of like boomer shooter. Like it's a very like Doom kind of perspective. and the kind of conceit of it is that it's got this like very like vaporwave 90s anime kind of aesthetic, but mixed with like a little bit of that like 80s, like edgelord action hero, stuff. It's, a vibe and a style that I really resonate with. And you're in this kind of like, near future where it's like this, like, capitalist, like evil capitalism, like hellscape, right? And it's like this, you are an influencer who is like trying to like go through this tower and rescue this princess, and the gameplay loop is that like every 10 seconds you'll like just die, right? You have 10 seconds to navigate the floor, and the only way that you get more time is by killing enemies or like doing combos, or like there's certain items and stuff like that you can interact with, like that might give you a little boost. So you cut out again there, Steve. What was that?
Crisis.
One more time. Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
How very time crisis.
Yes, there you go. So yeah, there's stuff like you can like do stuff like get soda cans out of a machine that'll give you a little boost, or you can find like all these different like items in the overworld like that you can like pick up and use in a combo, or like you can like kick somebody into like like through a glass wall or into like an electrical, generator or something like that. So it's like this very like, it's like almost like a rhythm game, because you have to like very quickly like look at the hallway and be like, all right, I'm going to hit this guy and then grab this drink and then kick this guy and go. And like, you really have to work out your momentum to keep going. And every time you lose, you just go back to your last checkpoint, and it's kind of like, let's take another run. So I liked that about it a lot too, because it feels like almost reminiscent of something like Celeste in that way, where it's like very friendly of the like live, die, play again, live, die, play again. And I don't feel like it feels as like punishing of failure in the way that some roguelikes likes can. Which is something that often turns me off, is like that like feeling like I'm not progressing, whereas like this does have a very steady progression because it is still like level based, because you're moving from floor to floor. So it feels more like trying to solve a tough like platforming level than it does say like the kind of randomness of even though there is like it is generated, there are drops, there is like you'll find this gun or that gun, there is still that element to it. But I feel like because it has that kind of like real bite-sized approach, I never felt like bogged down in that, which I really
you're not like starting from scratch every time. You're like, oh, I guess I'll like I worked so hard at that, now I've got to start again. It's like, cool, let's get straight back into it, one more run kind of thing.
Yeah, it to me it felt more forgiving of that style of play, of like I never felt like at the end of a run it was always like I'll get it next time, not like all right. Like I remember I would feel that way like if I was having a good run in Hades, right, and then like you make a mistake and you're like fucking A, like that's hours of progress that's just wasted. And I never felt that way in this, which is cool. And again, I really do like the world building and like the vibe and the style of it and everything for a game that is like not really oriented on, it's not a story, it's not like this, it's not, a Last of Us or something like that, right? But like it tells a really like good, tight, fun story, and it like has some like fun social commentary, and like, yeah, it's a really, really hype game. I think it's it got some like good reviews and good attention, but I it's not a game I've seen a ton of people in the community talk about. So
me neither.
Anything that I said like piques your interest, pick it up. It's worth a try, I think.
Mullet Mad Jack. Yeah, I hadn't seen this one. I didn't play this one.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've had a few friends that are like into the boomer shooters that vibe with that one this year.
It's in a bundle with Ultra Kill, so I imagine they came out some of the time, right?
Ultra Kill has been out for a while. Ultra Kill's like a couple of years old at this point. I think it gets updates all the time. It was in early access, but this came out this year, so maybe it's like just because they're both boomer shooters, they've cobbled them together. But
yeah, Ultra Kill didn't make it on my list because it didn't come out this year. That was another game I did pick up this year, but didn't didn't come out. So
I did a lot of that this year.
I
did a lot of that this year too. I played a couple retro games over and like played some stuff from last year that I missed out on. I
picked up like the Uncharted collection again, played a bit more Hitman, got into Fallout again. So it was like a load of
I
stuff
did that.
like
Actually, I beat Fallout 4 this year for the first time.
Yeah,
you
both talked about it, didn't you?
Honestly, I feel like next year I want to add like a new to me award, where it's like, oh, I played this old game and it's really good. You should play this old game.
Yeah.
Play old games, guys. It's cool.
we should have a like the not to get too into what we'll do next year, but we should have a new to me and also like what was the best game we played that year if it didn't come out this year,
Sure.
Sure.
All right, cool. So what's your number 8, Max?
Number 8 for me was Mini Shoot Adventures. I don't know if you guys heard about this one. This one sort of flew under my radar. I think it was Tom92 is his Twitter handle. I can't remember his surname, so sorry. It was Twitter at the time, or he'd sort of sent it over to me or tagged me in it and was like, I think you'd enjoy this. It's like a top-down bullet hell Metroidvania style, like Zelda-like. I'd say it's more like a Zelda-like, sort of top-down Zelda-like, but with bullet hell elements, and it was just a lot of fun. It didn't look like much, and I think that the name didn't help. It didn't sort of have like a strong brand to it or an identity to it, but what was there was just a lot of fun. It was like an expansive world. There were loads of like fun secrets to find. You sort of felt like you could explore around, and much like Zelda games, it was like, right, I'm in this bit and I've uncovered this bit of the map and I can go and explore and solve puzzles, do races, unlock new powers. Oh, now I've got this power, I can go over here and do this, and there's dungeons and things like that and boss fights, and it's all that rhythm, that bullet hell style of like, right, dodging bullets, learning patterns, doing my own attacks. And I think this is one, that definitely fly under the radar, and I think it deserves to be looked at and to be played. And, even though it does have a bit of like a generic-y look and sound to the name and things like that, the actual gameplay and the sort of the personality it does actually show through, like the animation and things like that is very nice. And I think this is one that I was surprised by. I was really pleasantly surprised by, and by the time I got to the end, I was like, wow, I was not expecting that to be as good as it was. It sort of came out of nowhere for me. It was only that Tom had tagged me in it that I even saw it. And yeah, I think this ran perfectly on Steam Deck as well, obviously. So this was a perfect, like, get into bed, play an hour of this before bed, and that was that game.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'd recommend this one. Again, like, if anything I've said there has resonated with you, like Pete said, it's well worth checking this one out.
Hell yeah. It's good. I remember you talking about this one. That's cool.
Yes. I think it's one of the lost reviews.
Yeah, never too late. If we can always put it together.
It's never too late.
So my number 8 is maybe going to be a controversial one, but I had to include it. So mine is it's Pokemon Yellow Legacy. So this is actually a ROM hack that came out this year.
Okay.
And I really debated whether or not I should include this on the list because it's a ROM hack of an old game, which obviously is like, it has a like kind of, it's playing with the net down a little bit, right? And like we try not to like, give too many flowers to remakes and things like that. But we've talked a lot on the Steam Deck podcast about how one of the things that is so cool about the Steam Deck is like being able to have, fan games and hacks and stuff like that get the console, kind of home console treatment. And, so this is a project that was made by a YouTuber named Smith Plays Pokemon. And this is actually part of a trilogy of hacks that he's done for the first 3 generations of Pokemon. And this one, basically the goal of all of them is to kind of like go through the entire like game and make adjustments to things like move sets and, like when Pokemon learn certain abilities, attacks and like stat changes and stuff like that to make like every Pokemon more viable. Like it's just a lot of these like little tweaks that make the game, I think, play the way that you probably remember it rather than the way that it is, right? And like with the learnings of, how certain things became standardized over time in the franchise, right? And it, I think, is really cool because there's a lot of these kinds of hacks that exist to either like, oh, like we took this old game and modernized it, right? Or like we're bringing quality of life features to this old game or something like that. And what I think this game does so well is it really, really strives to maintain the feel of the game and the pacing of the original game, but just like in a way that is a lot more thoughtful and that like is really, really like, it's almost hard to describe because this is like one of those games that's like, it's on my Mount Rushmore of video games. It was a very formative experience for me, but it's also a game that like I go back to all the time, right? And it's like I replay it the way that people go and watch it like a favorite movie, right? And this is now my favorite way to play Gen 1 definitively because it really, really like, it does so much to improve all of the kind of like little flaws that exist in those games without taking out any of the like goofy flaws that have become like a core part of the experience. Like there's like the way that like critical hits in that game work are broken, right? Like it's based on the speed stat and it's like very easy to cheese, but that's like a core part of like competitive play in that generation. So that's like, well, we didn't take that out because like that's like it's not in the spirit of this game to remove that quirk, right? But like the fact that like there are dozens of Pokemon that have like such abysmally bad movesets that they're not usable unless you use TMs, and there's only one copy of every TM in the, it's like it severely limits like how much you can use certain Pokemon. It discourages you from like changing up your team over time. Like it's all these little things that like with hindsight the franchise has like learned and made adjustments to. But yeah, it's like it is a perfect overhaul without making it feel different. And I think that's a really, really tough line to toe. And I got so much joy out of playing this game that if I were to bump it, it would have been for the Plucky Squire, which is a game that I thought was okay. So I had to give it to this because it really was an experience that was meaningful for me. It was the most fun I had on Steam Deck this year, I would say. Well, actually, that's not true, but among it. And I think if you're somebody who is like me and like has that like, oh, I love going back to Gen 1 thing, or you're someone who hasn't played it in a long time and you kind of would nostalgically like to play it again, I could not recommend this more highly. Pokemon Yellow Legacy, Smith Plays Pokemon. And if you're more of a Gen 2 or a Gen 3 person, Emerald just came out and Silver came out before this one. Or Crystal came out before this one. So go check them out. This team did really great work. And I say that as somebody who's enjoyed quite a few ROM hacks in the last 4 years or whatever since we got our Steam Decks.
See, I thought when it was Legacy, it was going to be like a Legacy board game. But it's not. It's like
which I guess is sort of like Nuzlocke. Is that it? Like because in Legacy board games, it's like okay, I'm done with that. I crossed that. Whereas Nuzlocke, if your Pokemon's dead, that's dead forever. Sorry, mate.
No, I like Legacy board games, but Legacy board games aren't necessarily like it's a permadeath thing. It can be something changes in the world, and then it permanently is that like there might be like a separate piece that goes onto the board and that's stay there forever throughout the game. So I thought like maybe there'll be changing something in the game.
I'm really this is it. I'm gonna send this to some mates who I know like going back and playing sort of the games, but like imagine being able to change these. There are some things about this that are really interesting. It's like, oh, that makes it so like this quality of life stuff,
And if you are interested as well, or again, if you're like Max and you have a friend that you think would be interested, the YouTuber Smith Plays, like he has a video where it breaks down all of the changes, which I sent to a couple of friends as like, here's the elevator pitch. Check this out if you're interested. And I got a couple people to download it that way. So check it out.
Number 7 for me, is it?
That's right.
Number 7 for me was Another Crab's Treasure. Another game we reviewed for the channel. I really enjoyed Another Crab's Treasure. It was another one of those games that like exceeded my expectations. I was excited for it before it came out. I thought, yeah, this looks like it could be like a fun, goofy game. And then the first sort of hour or two, I remember thinking, oh no, I'm not having fun here. This is not. This feels a bit janky. This feels a bit like they haven't really understood the games that they are, riffing on. But then the more I played of it, the more I was like, oh no, I just didn't get it. There were some things that they did patch in, but I was like, oh, I just didn't get it. I didn't give it the time it deserved. And by the end of it, I was like, oh, I would like more of that. It wasn't quite as deep as your Dark Souls, your Elden Rings, where you can have more in-depth builds or loads of different weapons. But the mechanics that were there were very fun. You had you had your shell and you had your fork, and you could unlock a way that you could put your shell onto your fork to make a hammer, and that would then be based on like the how long you could have that hammer was based on the strength of the shell. So you'd have to think about, right, do I want a shell that's going to be heavy that I can quickly swap out and then quickly find any old shell? And each shell had its own ability, and you'd like, right, I like this ability, so I'm going to look for shells that have this ability, or I like having more defense, so I'll go for a shell that's more like that. There was an interesting parry mechanic. Like, it was just one of those ones where it was very well thought out, and all of the platforming elements they added into it, like the sort of like a grappling hook, and you sort of like glide along the world in some areas. That gave it more of like a Sekiro sort of like nimbleness to it that I think was interesting. It's had some fun commentary on like environmentalism and things like that. Like a lot of fun references to like, oh, everything's, all your currency is microplastics. Your character is like becoming like imbued in microplastics. Like the more you play, and that's like the trash is like your currency as well. People want trash, and there's trash everywhere. All the shells you're wearing are just pieces of garbage that have been dropped around. I think the first level, like I remember sending a screenshot to some of my friends and be like, oh, this is funny. Like this road is paved with microplastics, and then like there's like cigarette butts dotted around. Like this is funny commentary. But I had a good sense of humor, and by the end of it, I remember like at one, there's sort of like a sharp change in its vibe sometimes, where it sort of goes from like, oh, I'm so lighthearted, ha ha ha, to all of a sudden you're like, oh my god, this is dark. Like, is this the boss fights get harder, and the enemy design sort of becomes more frightening,
more sinister,
like sort of as you get like deeper into the ocean, and all of a sudden you're going from like, oh, it's just other crabs, to like, oh, here are these like terrifying deep ocean fish.
That's one of my favorite hat tricks that like a piece of art can pull, is like the idea of like, we've established a tone, and then it's like, but sometimes it has a different tone. It's like that is like such a like, and then assuming that those two things like mesh well. Right? Like,
yes, yeah, and it really does, yeah.
That's that, yeah. Because I mean, like, I love that, right? Like, it draws you in with this like cartoonish vibe, and it's like, oh yeah, haha, pollution. Then it's like, no, this is serious, and it's like,
yeah. This is an upset character right now, you
clever.
Do feel bad for him. But yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I think I rated it quite highly when I reviewed it from memory.
You did.
Yeah, so I would say another Craft Trader. I think they're a great team, and I really sort of hope that they. I know that they were working on something else, and they were worried about, or they were sort of looking for funding for another game they're working on. So they're working on something, and I'm going to be looking out for that.
All right. So then, it hurts me to put this one this low on my list, but number 7 for me is going to be Dragon Age: The Veilguard.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Oh yeah.
This game was such a like interesting play, because it was very much a mixed bag for me. There were a lot of moments where it really was like, checking boxes for me, right? Like, it was like answering interesting like lore questions, right, that like I've been thinking about for a long time, where they're like a great character moment, or the kind of hallmarks of like what you expect from a Dragon Age game, from a BioWare experience. And I think that there are just like so many really good ideas that like have very, very mixed execution. Like, there are a couple big changes to the way that they like handled like NPC interaction, and I think for better and for worse, like in the kind of way it's worked proper, right, from the last several games from the two big franchises from them. It's like you have this like hub base, right, and like between missions you go back, you go and chat with your squad mates or whatever, and you can kind of like either talk about like the events that have just unfolded, but then there's also this opportunity to kind of like just have like kind of inane conversation, like ask them about like where they're from and what their family's like, and like getting that kind of like bullshit time with them. And I think like this game kind of like, rather than that, it aired on the side of doing this thing where like it made a ton of these little like cutscenes or like just like overworld dialogue and stuff like that, so that when you would go to the space like to visit a character, like you would always know if there was something new for them to say, and then if there wasn't, you'd get maybe a little bit of that environmental chatter rather than like me going through the process of like, it's a common experience of I'm back at base, let me go run up to everybody and talk to them and see if they have anything new to say. They don't? Okay, I'll go back and do another mission. And I think that like that was like a smart idea, right? Like it was a good system, and I like the thought there of like, well, let's remove that wasted time, right? When you come back to the base, you'll immediately know if people have something to say to you. That's great, right? And there are also these little like mini like missions that you'll go on where it's kind of like you get a little like one-on-one time with an individual character, and that's where you'll get parts of their backstory and stuff like that. Like, I think that those are all ideas that like I like them, and sometimes they really work. But like the thing that's so frustrating overall is that like the thing that is the most poorly executed is the script. And that's a dagger, right? For this game and what these games are supposed to be. And I think like the overall story is pretty good. Like it like the on paper, right? Like where it's like, these are the beats of the narrative, right? Like I think the big moments feel like big moments. Like the ending particularly is a really, really like high stakes, like cool final mission. There are some like really big choices that you have to make that like echo through the story in a really meaningful way. And like those like structural things I think are all really good. It's like where it lets you down is in the small moments. And like those are all of the best moments in all of the games that have preceded this. Right. And it's like, like a great example is like, I saw someone make the point that it's like, I feel like all the characters are too agreeable, where it's like, there used to be this kind of sense of like, well, I'm role playing my character, right? And my character is this way and they act this way. And because of that, these companions like me and these ones don't. Right. And like,
that was one of the best things in Baldur's Gate, right? Like, you could piss people off and they would openly tell you, I don't like that. Why did you do that?
Yeah. And it's like, you could have a situation where like, in previous Dragon Age games where it's like, I make a decision, right? Like there's like a mission where it's like, you could do something that offends another character to the point where they try to kill you. Right. Or they're like, I can't follow you anymore. Like I'm out. Right. And the whole conceit of this game is so revolved around the like, we're bringing the team together, and the team like needs to, like, it's like a, it feels almost like kind of like an Avengers kind of thing where it's like, we're bringing a squad together and this is the team that's going to go on the mission to save the world. And like, that's fine. I like that as like, I'm pulling a squad together is a fine setup for this kind of story. But the fact that like, I don't know, it's like there's just not that same level of depth to the characters in the terms of like, if you like pick a companion from any of the other games, right? Like I could really get into like, here's a nuanced explanation of what their attitudes about like sex and sexuality are, right? Or like religion, or, their home, the city that they come from, or something like that, right? And it's like with all these really rich, small details, right? And like, I feel like a lot of those moments get painted with a broad brush, and it's a lot of like, this really means something to me, rather than like, oh, I can, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of telling rather than showing. And there's a lot of like dialogue that feels like they don't trust the player to like follow what's happening, right? Where it's like, a mission is about to go off, right? It's like, and it's like, okay, here's the dialogue where we're all standing around and I'm like, okay, so you're going to do this and you're going to do that. And then that'll make this magical thing happen. And that's how we'll defeat this person. And it's like, yeah, no,
dude, that's the justification of everything these days. Like, I feel like everything just like tells you rather than shows you. It drives me crazy.
Well, I mean, that's probably because, I mean, there was a report from GDC, right, about how like 45% of game developers were hit with layoffs last year, and that the vast majority of them were writers and narrative teams. So it's not super surprising. So yeah, it's like it's one of those things where like I think this game's harshest critics are being unfair because like I did overall enjoy the game, and like there are moments that I found to be very memorable, and like certain characters I really liked, and you know it's like there are like these flashes of like what this game could be if it didn't have this tortured 10-year development cycle where it was 3 different games and they fired a bunch of writers near the, you know, it's like
hopefully there's another one, and hopefully that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I hope so, but I gotta say, like, I am a little bit worried that this is like gonna kill the franchise or put it on ice for even longer, because it was 10 years between this one and the last one, and like granted that's not this game's fault, but like they just talked about, there was just an announcement today that they're restructuring BioWare, and they took a bunch of people that were on the like B team, right, and put them on other projects within EA. A couple of people are getting laid off, and everybody's focused on Mass Effect. So now it's like, well, if Mass Effect comes out and it's has a similar reaction, or it, you know, is worse or whatever, right? If Mass Effect is not a hit, then BioWare is dead. And if it is a hit, they're gonna make 2 more Mass Effects. So it's like, I don't know, man. I'm a little bit. It's a bummer because like there's so much about this game that I like and that I want to like more than I do, and I think it's even a game that like I'll probably play again in the future when I replay all the series, and I'm sure I'll enjoy a lot about it again. But it's so hard to have waited for this game for 10 years and to see it, and it's like, yeah, this game's like a 7 or like a low 8, and like it really could have been a lot more, right? And it's like, honestly, a low 8 is generous. It's probably like a 7. And I want to like it more than that because I like Dragon Age and I love this world, and there's so much about it that means so much to me, you know? But yeah, it just like, for all of the peaks that are good, it's like the valleys really remind you of how good the rest of the series is. And as like, I just replayed 1, 2, and 3 over the course of the last 2 years, they're very fresh in my mind, and it's not a me waxing nostalgic about an old game as much as like there are things that this fails at that are the most important things that this should do. And it's so tough to be in the like that middle ground of like, I think it's worth playing, and also it's not as good as it should be and as it could have been, and that stings. It sucks. So yeah, I like the game, but the fact that it could be so much more, and I really wanted it to be so much more, yeah, it's like this is just where it ended up for me.
7 on your list for a 7 out of 10 game.
Nice.
Not too bad.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I played like enough games last year that like I had to fight for like a top 10, and I don't start getting into the 7s till like 15th. Shut up, Steve.
Yeah, I like I said, like I spent a decent chunk of time this year on like checking old things off the list or whatever. Like there were definitely less games overall that caught my attention this year, because like on my list of games I played overall, this is the most games I've started and bounced off of since we started doing Game of the Year at FlipScreen.
Yeah, I think I dropped off 5 games this year, and then there were
same.
sort of 4
6 actually.
early access games that sort of like I couldn't put on this list because they're not finished, so I haven't finished them. But yeah, that's
I've put early access games on my list.
I'm going to do early access honorable mention at the end if that's okay with you, just because I do want to speak about them, but I'm not counting them as out to 1.0, but that's fine.
That's fine.
So my number 6 is Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. This was a very fun, surprising little game that I wasn't like when it first announced. I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be fun. It's gonna be, Breath of the Wildizing top-down Zelda, but in a new way." And the closer we got to release, the more I was like, "Okay, I'm not 100% sure." It was only speaking to a friend of mine who had played it for review, who was like, "Trust me, this game's great. You're gonna want to get it." I was like, "All right, fine, I'll get it." And the first hour or so, I didn't vibe with it. It didn't hit like I thought it would. I was like, I felt disconnected for a minute. Felt like I was playing a different game, and I just sort of like put it away and resigned myself to like, okay, that's a shame. It's only when I saw someone, I think it must have been on Twitter at the time, said something like, if you're finding sort of you're not enjoying Echoes of Wisdom, do what I did. Think of it like you're playing a Pokemon game. Think of it like you're playing like each of the things that you capture as a Pokemon that you're sending out to do battle for you. And I was like, all right, okay, I'll give this a go. And I went in with that approach, and I really enjoyed this. I played the whole way through.
That's great, man.
I 100%ed it. If there were achievements, I probably would have platinumed it because I did everything you could possibly do in this game. I was very happy with the quality of life stuff where you'd get to the end of it, and usually like at the end of Zelda games, it's like, right, time for the big sweep, and then there might be a point where it's like, oh, I guess I'll just use a guide for these last ones. But it gave you everything you needed on the map to know where you need to be for these items and what you might be missing. There were fun side quests. There were sort of great puzzles. You could just sort of brute force it. I think it does that cool thing of like, it's easy to get through because you can just like, this is OP, so I'm going to use this over and over again. Oh, I can just use the bed because it's the perfect, platform for me. I can just spawn loads of them. But you could use the pieces in interesting ways. You could solve puzzles in different ways, so much so that like we were in a group chat, and because I was playing it a bit later, because I'd sort of bounced off of it, that I'd be able to scroll back and go like, oh, you solved this puzzle this way. I actually solved it this way.
Funny.
And they're like, oh, cool, I didn't think about that. Or I think someone else then started playing and they're like, oh, how did you approach this? Did you approach it the same way I did? And then it would be, oh, yeah, I did this way. It's like, oh, I didn't even think of that because I hadn't got that echo yet. I think it did a good job of like giving Zelda something to do and characterizing her. And yeah, it just sort of all came together in the end. And I'm really impressed with what they did by making it feel familiar, and it felt like Zelda, and it sounded like Zelda, and it looked like Zelda, but you were playing as Zelda, so it wasn't Zelda, if that makes any sense. And I would appreciate more in this style, more in this world, which I'm pretty sure I said when Link's Awakening came out. I was just like, yeah, let's do more of this, and it took us a few years for it, so I don't expect one of these anytime soon. But yeah, it's nice to have something in a you think you've seen it all with Zelda. Sometimes you think you think you know what you're getting, and that they can still surprise you in a familiar way. Especially when there have been so many contemporaries like Tunic that have done similar interesting things, that they can still find a way to innovate and surprise.
I think that's the thing I find so interesting about Nintendo, because like I think especially like right now, right, like the culture is like very like in a toxic way obsessed with IP. And like things needing to tie into things and be part of it's got to be able to be part of a franchise and have tie-in potential and be able to be on a fucking Slurpee cup in 7-Eleven. And it's like, obviously that's been to the detriment of like culture, right? Like it's been very homogenizing, and it's like everything needs to be like a goddamn franchise. And it's like that game is like, and the way that like Nintendo and other like good shepherds of IP handle it is like, that's what you got to do, right? Is like be able to breathe new life into it and find new angles to it. And between like, this being a new thing that they tried out, and obviously all of the big risks they took with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, it's been really nice to see, them like not just chase Ocarina and not just like cash in on the name, right? It's like, let's think about what else Zelda can be, because I think it can be a lot, right? A lot more than we probably thought. And that's definitely exciting.
Well,
Absolutely.
I, for one, hope we do get one sooner rather than later. And I'd like to see one this year, so Max gets a red point on the predictions board. He said no Zeldas in 2025.
I was very specific. I can't remember what I said, but I'm pretty sure I was more specific than that. But we'll argue about
Yeah, it was
that.
something like that, but like a port was fine or something. I can't really remember what it was.
See.
I was very, very specific. But still.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. There's a word on the street that it's a Wind Waker port, so if that's the case, you'll get your point, and there you go. So
that's all right then. Let's keep it up. Pete, before we have to introduce Steve into this with his thoughts, what's your number 5?
Losing my number 6.
6. You're number 6. Sorry.
Perfect segue otherwise. So my number 6 is, and this is like kind of funny to me that these two games like landed next to each other. But it's Life is Strange Double Exposure. So this, if you're unfamiliar, uninitiated, right? The original Life is Strange follows a character named Max Caulfield. The games that have come out subsequently have all started different character, right? So she's kind of like, aside from like some comics and stuff like that are like extended universe stuff, they've never kind of gone back to the well of the original game. And, you know, none of the original team is at Deck 9, the studio that made this game. So there's like a lot of reason to go into this with concern, right? That it's like you're kind of drudging up something that like ended in a place that I think was final, right? And I think like for something that it's funny because this team also did a prequel to the original game that starred the sidekick character, and my initial reaction when that game was announced was, what are you doing? Like, how is this? What? No one needs this. No one asked for this. Like, why? And it's a really good game, and it was really good. I think this is a little bit more labored than that. I think this game has a few things that are clunky, right? Like there are a couple like plot holes, and not anything that's like egregious, but stuff that's kind of like, it's like, well, what did that mean then? Or what was the kind of the purpose of this thing, right? And it's like, it feels like they set up certain threads that like didn't really go anywhere, or that, you know, certain threads felt a little bit too connected to this kind of potential sequel, right, that they've hinted at in the game. But like a lot of the like core stuff, like what is the purpose in going back to this character, right? And like how have the events of the first game shaped her as a now, you know, near, I think she's like in her late 20s at this point. And like the like trauma of living through a supernatural event and feeling like, you know, you were responsible for the destruction of the town that you came from and the death of a lot of people. And, you know, it's like, it's kind of like engaging in the thought experiment of like, what happens to the person the day after the horror movie? Like you survived, but now it's like, you have to unpack all this trauma that you lived through. And it does those things really well. And I think my biggest criticism of the game is that like, it tries to distance itself a lot from the original and be like, this is its own story, but then all the stuff that's the best is this stuff where it's like, let's work through this unresolved trauma from the past. And it's almost like you almost wish that they had just leaned into that more and been like, maybe don't be afraid to rely on the original more, which like I think was a good goal, to be like, this needs to stand on its own. It can't just be references to things. And I think that does make the references hit a lot harder because they use restraint. So it's, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm kind of two minds with it, but like overall, I was more into it than not. And like, there were a lot of moments that I was like, you know what? Like you earned it. You earned going back to this well. You earned like trying to cash in on the feelings I have about this character and her relationships to other people. Like, and they got some of those things really right. So it's funny. It's like, it's almost the inverse of what I had with Dragon Age, where I'm like, mechanically, systems wise, I loved all those things. And the heart is where it was like lacking. I think this is a little bit more the other, where like some of the like leaps that it takes in terms of like, oh, like Max hasn't used her powers in 10 years, so they're different now. And it's like, okay, why though? And why are they different in this? Like, it's like, there's stuff like that if you're like a nitpicky like person about it, you could easily be like, well, that doesn't make sense, or that doesn't make sense, or that, but it's like, if you're like just engaging with what the narrative is presenting you and being like, I suspended my disbelief in the first game when they told me that this girl has time powers, right? And now I'm going to suspend my disbelief again to accept the idea that like she compares it to like a muscle and the muscle's atrophied, right? So now it's like, I can't control time the way I used to, but I can still like, the way I'm manipulating reality is different, but I am still doing it. And it's like, well, that's not that much of a leap, right? It's like, especially if you're someone who like reads comic books and stuff, it's like, there's a whole thing in the X-Men where it's like, oh, they have secondary mutations now for reasons. It's like, okay, yeah, it's like, it's superpower stuff. So it's like, again, right? To me, those are the kinds of things in a narrative that I can forgive if the character work and the like emotional beats of the story are served by a plot hole, then fine, whatever. Like that's okay in my book. So yeah, it's like, I could see this being a game where you play it and your mileage may vary, because I think the way that they handled Chloe, the sidekick character from the first game, was very polarizing. Some people really didn't like it. I think there are some missteps, but broadly, I actually thought it was handled with a lot of maturity in a way that I thought deepened the character of Max, which is a good reason to do something like that. So, yeah, it might not be a perfect slam dunk for everybody, but I think for me, it feels akin to the argument that people who like still watch The Simpsons or something do, where it's like, or like there was like the new season of Futurama that just came out on Hulu, right? And it's like, for my money, it's like, is this on the same level as what came before? No. Right? But like, on some level, there is that like, it's nice to be hanging out with this character again. It's nice to get a check in on this character who I was older than her when the first game came out, but I was young enough to still be able to like see myself in someone who was a teenager. And now as an older person, it's fun to see her. It's fun to get to check in with that character and see like how she's grown and changed. What are the ways that I still identify with her and those kinds of things. So it's like, the fact that some people don't vibe with it, I get, but I do think its harshest critics, I feel like, are mad about what they wanted the game to be rather than actually engaging with it for what it is. And for what it is, I actually got a lot out of it. And I went into it with the mindset of like, this will probably not have been worth the retread, right? And, I think it's arguable if it's like so good, like the Last of Us thing where it's like, why go back to that? And then Last of Us Part 2 is like, well, it's a fucking masterpiece. It's arguably better than the first, or as good, and whatever, right? Like, I said arguably. And to me, this is a lesser sequel, but a lesser sequel to something that I really connected with, and I was still able to get a lot out of. So I think if that sounds like, a ride that you want to go on, I would say go for it, because I think if you go in with the mentality of like, let me meet this where it is, rather than like be mad that it's not the fan fiction you had in your mind about where Max and Chloe's story went after the first game, I think you'll find that there's quite a bit here.
Cool.
Sounds like some Pete nonsense to me, gotta say.
Yeah, it is.
I had to get the dig in. I'm sorry.
I didn't comment about your little Metroidvania. All right.
No hard feelings, obviously. So far, we're about to get into number 5. Not a single crossover game.
Yeah,
it's about to change, I expect.
Let's pass over to your man Steve and see what he's got to say to ease us in nicely.
Yeah, number 5.
My number 5 is Windblown, which is an early access game, but I'm including it on my list because it did come out in 2024. This is the roguelike from Motion Twin, the makers of Dead Cells. I just loved this game. I thought it was great. The combat evolved over time. They kept putting out balancing updates. I very much enjoyed my like OP feather weapon, but they nerfed the hell out of it, so it didn't become as enjoyable to use. But it definitely needed that. But it's just really cool. The co-op, the world, kind of everything that's there. You can see that it's going to grow into something special. It's a shame that they kind of had to put it out as early access. I'd imagine that was due to like, for financial reasons. I've kept this locked down, and then in 2 years' time release this with the story, with all of the worlds, with everything there. I feel like more people would flock to it, because I do kind of feel like this is maybe going to get lost in the mix a little. However, it's not going to be on consoles for at least another year, I would imagine, and when it gets the 1.0 release. So people probably will pick it up on Switch 2 or on Xbox or on PlayStation or whatever. But if you're hungry for another roguelike, even though we've already spoken about, I think this is the third one in this episode alone.
Bit of a trend that I don't think I realized was happening this year, but it's like, a lot of roguelikes lately.
Yeah, they're always coming at you thick and fast. I remember this, like, there's a lot of them constantly, but there's only so many of them that are good or worth sticking with, and I think we've had a lot recently.
Yeah. Windblown, I think, is worth sticking with. However, if you're one of those people that doesn't want to touch an early access game, I totally get that, because I was like that with Baldur's Gate 3. I'm like that with Hades 2. I don't want to play Hades 2 until it's finished, because I loved Hades so much. But this was somewhat fresh, and I tried the demo on Steam Next Fest. I loved it. It came out in early access a week later, so I picked it up, and it was, I think, worth my time.
Yeah, I'll pick this one up at some point, probably when it actually does launch.
Yeah, the trailer I thought showed really well when we saw this one. Like, it's got a really nice style to it. It's like you got those kind of like, all the characters are like animals. Like the main guy's like an axolotl, right, or whatever. Like
you can choose. So you can choose.
I guess I mean like the main guy in the he's like in the middle of the image. Is what I guess I'm more saying.
But I was playing as a cat, I think, when I was playing it.
Nice. All right, so we're going to get into Max's number 5 pick in just a second here, but before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of January. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Asobi, Project Julian, Steve Stompy, Susan Still Likes Cats and Also Boobies, Voodoo Vic, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. Y'all the realest of the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. If you want to go check out those shows, the Nintendo Noise podcast and the Steam Deck podcast, you can get them and everything else we do by heading over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all the places we are, all over the web. However you want to get involved, whether that's joining the community to keep the conversation rolling between episodes over on Discord, writing in to get your thoughts read on the air, or just saying hi and telling us that you enjoy the show. You can do all that over there. Go click on some stuff. Helps us out a lot more than it costs you. All right, Max, hit us with number 5.
Number 5. My number 5 is Animal Well.
Oh, cool.
Which is a game that
collect.
Yeah, a game that I thought was going to. I was worried that it was going to be a game that was because it was the Donkey's Big Mode. It was a first game from Billy Basso. It had the big funding of a big YouTuber, and I thought, okay, is this going to be a game that sort of is less than some of its parts, or exactly as it seems to be, and blah blah blah. But it's one of those games that is surprising, and there was a lot to talk about when the game came out. There's a lot of like, I'm going to keep this all hush hush, keep it a surprise. And in fact, I think in my review, I specifically comment on where I say this part of the review, I usually explain what the mechanics are, how the game works. But I'm not going to do any of that, because discovery is a large part of what makes the game worth playing. And Animal Well has a lot of that. I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but the art style, the way that you, the abilities you have, they're unique. They're not things you see in other games, and it doesn't have a lot of text. It's very much you working things out as you go. It's sort of like a Metroidvania in a way, which is a term I learned about last year, which I really love, where through knowledge you become more powerful. Tunic does it really well. The Outer Wilds is, when you learn something, all of a sudden you're like, oh cool, I can apply this, or I could have always been applying this. Same with Tunic. It's like, oh, now I know this, I can do this, and I've always been able to do this. Same with Animal Well. It's like, oh, now I know how this works. I can apply this elsewhere. And you don't even necessarily have to have picked something up. You just picked up a piece of information or worked out a pattern or solved a puzzle in a certain way. You're like, oh, I can do it like this. So I ran out of breath because I was too excited. It's a very special game. My worry, I think, is it's going to be like a one and done. But that, something isn't special because you can replay it. It's special because you got what you got out of it at the time. And I think this is one that it's not a long game by any stretch. You can do it quite quickly, but if you really want to find all the puzzles, and there was a puzzle that the developer was like, people are going to be working on this for years. Didn't expect the game to blow up like it did, and in the Discord, I think the combined sort of like thousands of people working on it, they solved it within like a few weeks or something. And because there's like a message for solving it, you get a message that's like, oh, I don't know if anyone's actually going to be looking at this, and if you are, the game's probably years old by this point or something like that.
That's fine.
And it's there's small puzzles, there's game spanning puzzles, there's meta puzzles outside the game. There's one where I spent ages. I was like, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? And it turns out that in order to solve that puzzle, I had to treat what I was looking at as a barcode and use my phone to scan the barcode to get the solution to the puzzle.
Cool.
Which is really strange, because then you get a code that you have to apply in a certain way to do something. Anyway, bizarre. Love stuff like that. I'm sure everyone knows Animal World because it's the donkey game, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But I do also, it does give me better faith in Big Mode as a publisher.
Really cool. Because obviously, like you said, there's a lot of skepticism around that announcement, and for this to be their kind of first at bat, I think it was like, okay, cool. What else you got?
Yes, yeah, he's obviously got an eye for the talent, and I look forward to seeing what Billy Basso does next. I'm interested in whatever Big Mode decides to publish next. I think this was a smash hit for them. I don't know if they were expecting it to be as big as it was, and for sort of it to, for me, be better than a Zelda game in a year is a lot for a first time gamer.
Top 5
for a first time game developer. Yeah, top 5 for the year.
That's
yeah,
great.
really, really good.
Hell of a
Pete,
first at bat.
Let's see if we have any crossovers yet, because we still haven't had a single one yet.
Okay, so number 5 on my list is Pepper Grinder. So this was one that I reviewed earlier in the year, and I gotta say, this is the most out of touch I've felt with the general reaction to a game in a long time. I really liked this game. Mm-hmm. I reviewed it very highly when we did our 59-second review. Max and I had an episode where we chatted about it, and I told him all about it. And I really dig this game. I think it has a really good style, and I think the core mechanic, right, like the drill is really well executed, right? I think what makes most platformers stand out, right, is having some kind of unique traversal mechanic, and then finding interesting applications to that, right? You think of obviously Mario's kind of the gold standard for just run and jump, right? But it's you think of the bounce from DuckTales, right? Or you think of the way that you use I don't know, climbing or something like that, and Ninja Gaiden, right? Or whatever, right? And I feel so much of getting that thing, or I think of Mega Man's power ability, right? And it doesn't always have to be about necessarily traversal, but that unlocks creating platforms and stuff like that. And I think this game just does such a good job of being this core idea is fun, it's compelling, having the kind of Super Meat Boy-esque momentum based platforming, as well as using that same implement for the boss battles and for combat and stuff like that. Yeah, I think it's it's a really strong core idea that they apply well through every world, every level of the game. And I don't know, I think it's one of the fresher platformers we've gotten in the last couple of years, and especially from the indie space. And I'm just kind of surprised it didn't get more attention,
This, while it may not be a crossover in terms of on our list, this is a game that I played this year. And it's the kind of sort of, I was very, very positive about it during the next fest when we got to play it. It's a game I've been waiting for years. I remember it was just a series of GIFs. I was like, what a concept. I do think that it did a great job through the whole thing of iterating on its ideas and being like, here's something new, and it taking an idea and not holding on to that idea for too long. You know, it's just like, here it is. I think by the end, I felt like it was a bit sort of short, and I can't remember why I didn't sort of rate it as highly as, I mean, it could just be that I played so many games, it just didn't, go that high for me.
Yeah.
But I really did enjoy it. I think it looks great. I think it sounded fantastic.
Yeah, it has a great soundtrack.
Yeah, really great soundtrack. The boss fights were good. I just think maybe it was like too few levels, and while there were a lot of good ideas, maybe it would have been okay to stretch some of those ideas out a bit further to get more content out of it. But there's nothing wrong with short and sweet.
That's my thing, is like, I don't mind a game that's short if what you experienced was like meaningful. And it's like, I had such a great time with it. I was happy to go back and like replay levels to try and, improve my time and stuff like that. It's like, I don't know. I for whatever reason, I seem to connect with it more than the general audience, but I would definitely say it's if you're looking for a new platformer, I think this was the best one this year.
Oh yes, definitely worth playing. Absolutely worth playing.
40% off until February 3rd on Steam.
What does that mean, Steve? We have this every time. What does that?
Okay,
what is that in money?
It's £7.67 currently.
Pick it up. I recommend it very highly. Steve,
I need 2 pieces of information, Steve. I'm sorry, I need 2 pieces of information to know what a percentage is. But
okay, it was £12 something. Now it's £7 something. There you go.
That'll do.
Decent saving.
It is a decent saving.
My number 4 is Thank Goodness You're Here.
I wanted to play this.
Me too.
I thought was such a fun, very British, very northern game from Coal Supper, published by Panic. It's got an absolutely beautiful art style. The script, I think, is fantastic. It's just hilarious. The dialogue is really good. Like I said, it's very, very British. There's like graffiti talking about like Thatcher and like nonces and stuff on the wall that I feel like you kind of have to be ingrained in the British culture to understand. The soundtrack's great. The gameplay is just really funny. It's just really fun to like, use butter to get someone out of a hole in the floor and things like this. It's just great. They call it a slapformer, like a slapstick platformer, and I think it is 100% that, and it really delivers. I had a great time playing it. It's a short and sweet game. It's like 5 or 6 hours that you can kind of get through it, and I highly recommend it. I had a really good time playing it. I'm surprised neither of you picked it up, because I know we spoke about it before, and I thought one of you would have at least.
It's been in my cart for like weeks, and I was gonna get it and play it over the break, but some games that I'll talk about in a few minutes ended up stealing my attention away from the smaller stuff that I wanted to play that I didn't get to.
Yeah, I very much intended on picking this one up at some point, and then I either had too much to play or just didn't want to play anything. So this is like one day I'm sure I'll pick it up and play it.
Yeah, I think this will probably, the next time it goes on sale, I'll grab it and play it and be like, wow, this would have been one of my 10. Oh well.
Yeah, probably would.
It's always how that goes. But can't play it all.
Oh, it's me now, isn't it?
It's you, Max.
My number 4 is, this might be the first crossover we have. My number 4 is Astrobot.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's on my list.
Let's talk about Astrobot.
Let's talk about
I really, really, really enjoyed Astrobot. I knew I would. It's the reason I held on to my PS4 5 for the 6 months that I wasn't playing anything on it. So I was like, Astrobot's coming. And I'm really glad that I did. It came around at a time when I needed a game like that. Just something like, I didn't have to commit a whole life to it. I didn't have to like make it a lifestyle.
It's very digestible.
I could just dive in and really just feel joy. Really just like be like enthused and be like, oh, that's really clever they've done that. Sort of like playing a Mario game. I know there's a lot of the Mario comparisons. Let's get it out of the way. It was very much, even Reggie did it recently where he said it's like Sony were, or that help me out,
Team
Asobi, we're doing sort of Nintendo at their best, and it does feel like that, where there are some fantastic ideas, really well done, and like Mario Odyssey, it didn't hold on to its ideas for too long. The first half of the game, I was like, God, they're really chucking stuff at you. And the second half of the game didn't quite keep that momentum of new stuff for me. It was like, oh, it's this again. Oh, it's this again. And that's fine because it was all very high quality. But things like the mouse, when you become the mouse and you become really small, and the way that the world is designed to function when you are big and when you are small. And
there's some really exceptional level design.
Oh, really, really incredible. Yeah. And the flair on top of that of like all the different particle effects and all, like you'll be going for a thing and a level and all of a sudden like confetti comes out and people start going ha ha ha, and it's like it's celebrating me as someone doing something, and it makes me want to engage with the world and sort of like, you know, there's fun music and everything sort of like exploding around you, and it's just like, yeah, go you, and I'm like, yeah, go me, I'm killing it. And then even just like, I know I've complained a lot in the show about this in the past of like, it leans too much on being a PlayStation game. It leans too much on its core identity being you're in a PlayStation 5, you're collecting PlayStation characters, and that's going to run dry. But I did really enjoy, you know, doing a level and being like, oh yeah, this is, you know, Castlevania characters and Legacy of Kain characters and Bloodborne all in one level. It's like, oh, this is so exciting how this is like for me. And yeah, this was a joy. And it's one of those things that like, I hope this comes to PC in like a complete package so that I can play any content that comes out, you know, from now, whether they do any or not, I don't know. But
they've been doing like challenge levels and stuff, which are
yeah,
those are so
I'm
fun.
doing like, if they do like new, you know, like a I don't know, new world or something like that, I would like to play it, you know.
Sure.
So Pete, let's talk Astrobot, even though it's.
Yeah, I will save some of my thoughts because
Sure.
it will come up on my list later. But one of the things that you said that definitely resonated with me was like the way that it manages like items on the screen is like mind blowing. Like I remember when this generation kicked off, and there was kind of that conversation around like what this console generation is adding is less about like quote unquote improving graphics and more about adding depth. And like this game is so good at that. Like there are so many levels where like you mentioned the confetti thing, like you'll have these like levels where it's like they're like voxel levels and everything's a voxel, and when you hit anything it breaks into all these individual pieces and they like never disappear. And it's just like there's all these like thousands of like little particles on the screen that like all independently move and react to the physics appropriately, and it's just like there's just so much care put into it, and like every little moment is so thought out, and like to have a game that's like so graphically stunning like and artistically stunning, like not be chasing photorealism or, you know, even like something that's like you know, very stylized, like something like Ratchet and Clank, right, where it's like, well, like yeah, like it looks cartoony on purpose, right? Like this is that kind of vibe, but it's like it also has a little bit of like some things have like a more realistic look, some things don't. And like it's such a good example of how you can utilize style to make something look like, you know, whatever, I don't know, next gen, whatever, right? Like cutting edge on a way smaller budget and with like way less, you know, overhead, right? Because you're not worrying about like, well, you can see the reflection in the windows. It's like, who gives a shit? Like I'm way more interested in like, you know, I'm in this environment and it's like dynamic and interesting and beautiful, and there's things that I can see and interact with, and like every little corner has something, rather than like, but the sun, you know, it's like okay, whatever, you know, like I think those things are so much more like interesting line items to sell a PC part than they are things that actually like feel artistically satisfying. And I think this game is like such a great example of like how you can chase something that's like gorgeous and innovative and cutting edge in like a genre that is like looked at as like very outdated in a style
or
that's
childish or
and it's like it bucks all those conventions. And I have a lot more to say about that when we get to my time.
I felt like the beginning of the PS5 generation, we had in the first 6 or 7 months, I want to say, maybe less than that, we had the sort of two big exclusives for me were Demon Souls, the remake, and Returnal, right? They were the two big PS5 exclusive games that I was like, whoa, this is showing the power of the PS5.
Mm-hmm.
Demon Souls looks better than anything I've sort of ever played. It sort of had that incredible lighting, particle effects, the depth stuff you just had never seen before. Returnal did all that, and it was like 60 FPS, and it was like blazing fast, and it looked incredible. It had all this facial detail, and again, particle effects, lighting, all that sort of stuff. And then I feel like it just stopped looking that good. I don't know how anyone else feels about this, but it just sort of games stopped looking like that and stopped being like that. And it wasn't until Astrobot that I played something else where I was like, oh yeah, this is the power of the PS5.
I think on some level that's like you being more used to it and also like having a nice PC rig.
I mean, I do also really, it took a while for us to get through the cross-gen releases and the games started being built back for the PS4 in that generation. And now we're finally getting the fruits of, right, these are games that got started when the PS5 hardware existed.
Right. True. Yeah, well put. Okay, so my number 4, and I believe this will be another one with crossover, is Indiana Jones and the Great Circle.
Oh.
No reaction. Okay.
It's on my
it's on your list? Okay.
Another crossover. You guys chat away.
There we go. So I mean, I don't think this is controversial to say, but I think this is the first game that has come from Xbox Studios. I mean, this entire generation, right? Like, quite some time that feels like a slam dunk, right? Where it's like, this was one of the games of the year. This was one of the, like, games everybody was talking about, games everybody was playing. Because, yeah, this game is great. It's really well executed, I think. It is a really well-paced story. I think that, like, the overall story is, like, in the neighborhood of, like, 12 to 15 hours. It can be a little longer, a little shorter, depending on, like, whether or not...
It could be a lot longer if you want to get all the collectibles.
Yeah, right. And it can be, like, probably, twice that length plus if you want to get all the collectibles. But if you're not pressed about collectibles, it is a really, like, a pretty tight story. And I think it is the kind of, like, digestible, like, story-driven AAA game that, like, I really appreciate, and we don't get that often, that, like, is in the vein of something like an Uncharted or what have you. And, like, yeah, I mean, I think, I'm not, like, the hugest Indiana Jones fan, but I like Indiana Jones. I like the original trilogy quite a bit, and I think this feels like it slots right in there. Like, it really nails the tone. I think Troy Baker gives a really great performance, and there are moments where you hear that it's Troy, and it's like, that sounds like Troy Baker, but there are other times where he really disappears into the role, and, like, certain line reads really just feel like a Harrison Ford line, and I think he deserves a lot of praise for that performance, for sure. And I think, the kind of, like, conceit of it as this, like, hybrid, like, it's first person and sometimes it's third person and like all that stuff was kind of weird. And at the rip, it was a little bit like, how is this gonna work? Like, and I just really think that they nail it at every opportunity. And I think it is, like, the most unique playing AAA game I feel like I've played in a really long time, where, like, the combat, like, being, like, this first person, like, fist fighter basically, and like you barely ever use guns or anything like that, and it's like, it has a lot of, like, elements of, like, immersive Sims, where it's like there's stealth and there's combat and there's, you can go quiet, you can go loud, and it's like, it's not as deep as something like a Dishonored or something like that, but it's almost like a baby's first immersive Sim mixed with, like, the flow of, like, a story-driven first-person shooter, like something like a Far Cry or something like that, where it's, like, beat to beat, yeah, it's really good. It has really exceptional production values. I think the art is really good. The soundtrack is really excellent. I really liked the sidekick character Gina. I thought she was a really great, like one of the, a really great video game companions, a really fun character to bounce off of.
Like she annoyed me at times. She's like, "Hey, Indy, come and have a look at this," and I'm like, "No, I'm busy over here looking at the collectibles." But, hey, have you got the key for this door? No, I'm too busy reading this document, but I'll get to you at some point. Don't worry.
I think you can turn the hints off, because I think I did.
You can, yeah.
Yeah, I turned them off.
It's constant. She's constant. Otherwise, she's like, "Hey, look, I think that like that circle thing you've got can fit in this slot here."
I do like that though. It was like a slider, right? Because it was like you could have it like default more, less, or off, which is like that's great because that is an accessibility feature for some people, right? Like if you have vision impairment,
the like Luigi's Mansion hints though at the beginning. It was like she was so obvious, and I was just like, I can't
don't tell me how the puzzle works. I want to figure it out. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, for me, it really fired on all cylinders. It didn't overstay its welcome. I thought that the unique mechanics that it introduced, like the whip and stuff like that, were all good, and they were like pretty deep. Like there were things that I would like realize halfway through the game, I can do this this way, like that's really cool. And I like that it doesn't hold your hand too much for that kind of stuff. It kind of lets you work some of that stuff out. It has like I like
the like skill progression there. Like you'd get the magazines or the comics or whatever you'd find, and that was what I was really hunting for when I was running around the Vatican. I was in all of the collectibles because I really wanted to like boost up my skills. But then like some of the stuff that you mentioned about like some of the immersive sim stuff, the fact that you can't go in certain places without certain outfits on, like otherwise he'll get recognized. But then when he gets into adventure mode, you see him put the jacket on and he gets the whip ready.
That, yeah.
And it's just like, I'm ready to go on an adventure again.
And I loved this stuff where it was like, like you have the disguise on, but like you're walking past the like general and he's like, I don't recognize that guy. Like who the fuck is that? It's like stuff like that where it's like, like that's it's cool, right? Because it's like a good stealth system, but not like it doesn't feel like it forces you to be too stealthy. Like there are situations where like you can go loud, but like that's not usually an option, which is like I feel like it feels very like the way that Indiana Jones solves problems, right? Where it's like you go in quiet and then when you get caught you start shooting people and running around and cracking the whip, and it's like and I just feel like it really captures the vibe of those films and that world so well. And it's like
agreed.
If we're going to be in this era where we're going to get a ton of like IP games because there's all this, you want
good
it to be
please.
What's that?
Good ones, please. Like this.
Yeah, like this is a great game, and it's like it's like it has that moment of like the way that Arkham felt when it came out, or like when Spider-Man came out, and it's like, great. If the licensed games are good, then I'll take them, right? Like I can deal with that for a couple of years, because this was a lot of fun, and I think the fact that they were trying to capture the vibe of a film character who like has this very non-traditional like way to deal with combat and all that stuff. It was kind of interesting the way that it forced them out of the box a little bit, and like they made a more unique game because they were trying to accurately adapt something, and that's kind of cool. I think Machine Games deserves a lot of praise. I think they really nailed it.
So my number 3 is Jackbox Survey Scramble, which I spoke a little bit about on the Steam Deck podcast a while ago. I think this is the best Jackbox pack they've put out in a very long
really?
time. It is constantly evolving. You can answer the survey questions constantly while you're waiting. The data updates and downloads every single time you open the game. It feels alive. They've updated it in December with 2 new game modes. They added in a mode called Dash and a mode called Dares, and you can kind of like play those games as well. They also like added in like gameplay settings, so you can like scramble up the squares. You can like answer every single question if you want to, like try and figure everything out, and you can kind of vote on whether you want to keep going or whether you want to end the game. But it's just really fun. I love just answering, like figuring out what people think. I used to love, I don't know what you call it in America, but it's Family Fortunes.
Family Feud.
Family Feud. I love Family Feud. It reminds me a lot of that. There's also reminds me a little bit of Pointless, which is another quiz show in the UK. And you just try and figure out what people are talking about, and the questions are funny. And I really like that you can just play this one with two people. You can play every single mode.
Oh, that's cool.
With two people, so it's great. Me and Henry just sit down every now and again, and we're just like, oh, let's just play. And sometimes, in squares, you can play on the same team, so you can try and figure out the board together, so you don't necessarily always have to play against one another, which is nice. And it's a rarity, I think, with Jackbox games that there's team stuff there. But you can play this in like English, French, Italian, German, but they've localized the answers, which I like, which is very unusual as well. Usually they're very US centric. We'll get questions about presidents that we clue who they are. We can turn those off, thankfully. And if you're in the UK or Australia, you can have UK and Australian answers. So like there was a question of like things that are in the junk drawer in the kitchen, and you just have to figure out like what the top answers are to that. And it's British things that are in the junk drawer in the kitchen,
jam,
like plasters
jelly.
and not band-aids. So it's like things like that you would sometimes have to like work your brain when you're playing a Jackbox game to go, oh, I've got to think what an American would say when I answer this question, because that's going to look like a decoy answer. Because
blend in.
Yeah, because you blend in. It's quite funny.
That is.
Yeah, I'm surprised by this. I'm glad that it is as good as it. You were saying, you mentioned it before. I'm glad that it was that good. I've just added it to my wish list because we played Jackbox over Christmas, and I was like, oh yeah, I do miss playing Jackbox. And it's cool that that it has all of the interaction from the users, and it's one of the things that can change and grow as well as it goes.
Yeah, and it's cheap. It's $8.99. It's like the cheap one of the get this. Don't bother with the naughty pack that also came out this year. That's trash. Get the Survey Scramble. It's not got many reviews on Steam. It's only got 200 reviews, so I don't think many people have picked this up. But I really think this is the best pack that they've released in a long time.
That's cool. I love the Jackbox games.
Oh yeah, same. Yeah. Right, is it my top three, or start with number three?
Number three.
Okay. Potentially controversial pick, but I had this argument with you guys last year or the year before, I think. I've gone for number three is Elden Ring Shadow of the Erd Tree. It's a DLC, okay. It's an expansion, but I got like a solid 40, 50 hours out of this.
It got nominated at the Game Awards. I think.
Good point.
Yeah, I think it's fine. Reasonable.
This was just took everything about. It was just a mini second Elden Ring. It added some great new features. It dragged me back into a world that was my game of the year from a few years before. It's rare that I go back for DLC, because by the time the DLC comes out, I'm past it. I'm not that bothered. Whereas I like it when the DLC is sort of like more of a standalone thing, like the Xenoblade Chronicles ones have always been. This is a standalone thing. You start again with this and blah blah blah. Whereas this was sort of like a mix between the two, where it is like your old character, but instead of having to take my New Game Plus character in and get battered because I haven't played the game in ages and it's really hard, the DLC takes your character, all the work you've put into it, all of the stats you've picked, all the weapons and items you've upgraded, blah, 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 and puts you in a new place with a new separate level scaling system, and new weapon types, new sort of armors, new abilities, all this sort of new stuff that you can pick up, new bosses and areas to discover, and it was just so strong, and what I like most about games like Elden Ring is also the sort of the community, the sort of sense of there's a bunch of you playing it, and similar to when Breath of the Wild came out, it's like, oh, did you see that? Oh no, I didn't see that. Oh, and there's like mysteries to solve, and it's not all cut and dry of like, oh, it's like a 6-hour campaign and we all saw the same thing. It's like, oh, I'm 30 hours in, I've not even been over to that part of the map yet, but I've been in here and I've discovered more than I thought I would. And I think they did a great job of underselling the DLC, where they said, oh, it's an area about the size of Limgrave, it's about the area of the first area of Elden Ring, but they sort of, that is maybe from top down it's that, but if the verticality of it was insane. There were sort of incredibly deep areas, there were some higher up areas, there were like areas of the map you couldn't reach for a long time, and you could sort of see from a while off, but you had to like go through whole dungeons and do various things to get to these areas.
I mean, I remember playing that first, like in the net demo or whatever it was, the net test, and it was like, you couldn't go outside of that area, but there was still so much to do. And then when the game came out, like discovering that, oh shit, this map just grows and grows, and then they've added in like a whole other section now. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, and I think it's well worth the cost of entry. It was well worth the wait for all the stuff. I think it like put such a nice cap on Elden Ring. And it
has that other thing, right? That they're doing in the Elden Ring
Night
universe.
Rain. Yeah, there's a new. So I've been playing this last week, and tomorrow I'm going to sort of hang out with a friend of mine, and we've been playing the Elden Ring seamless co-op mod that lets you basically, the like Pete mentioned before about like how co-op is. You go, you rest, someone joins your world for a boss fight, and that's that. This just lets you do it. You're in each other's worlds permanently, and we spent a few hours just dicking around, killing bosses, getting weapons, trying things out, handing things between us, and we had a great time. We were like, oh, we cannot wait for Night Rain to come out because it's going to be this, but not a game we've already played. It's going to be something new, and he's never played the DLC, so I think our plan with this Elden Ring DLC is to play the whole game, unlock the DLC, and then we'll together, he'll experience it for the first time. We'll play through the DLC together. So I am jazzed to be playing it again. Was really so excited to go back to Elden Ring. I'm so glad I got a chance to sort of an excuse to play the game again. And yeah, I just think this was a triumph, and it just proves why FromSoft are the powerhouse that they are, and that they deserve all the props they get.
Mm-hmm. And Pete, this is your number 3 as well, right?
Yeah. So Elden Ring, love it. Game of the year. All right. So my number 3 is one I imagine probably the only game on all of our lists, Balatro.
You would be correct in that.
You would be correct.
Yeah. I really dug this one. I know you guys both had like real obsessive episodes with it. I was not quite so engaged with it, but I really dig the game. I've recommended it to tons of people. It's incredibly addictive. It's one of those, like, I think it's similar to what I was saying about Pepper Grinder, where it's a really strong core concept that is like just infinitely replayable. And I think the only reason I didn't spend more time with it was because I realized how much time I was playing it, and how I was like, okay, if I want to play anything else, I got to move off of this. And then that was it.
That might have been the problem I had this year.
Yeah, right. I played 5 games. It's like, yeah, it's probably because you played 7,000 hours of fucking Balatro. You both 100%ed 2 versions of the same game.
I haven't 100%ed it on mobile. That's just max. But on PC, I put in some hours. I think it was over 100 on PC. On mobile.
I think I've got 140 hours on PC, and then on mobile, I think I was a bit quicker on mobile because I got it.
You knew it already.
But I completed the collection 100% on PC, and I was like, what an achievement. That took 115 hours of my life. I was really proud of what I did. Wow, that was a lot of work. And I did it again on mobile in December, and it's just to me and my boss have been playing this a lot and sort of discussing it and talking about it, and I was saying to him, like, it's crazy how this long into the game, we're almost a year into it, and we're still like discovering new things that go together and coming up with new ideas and being like, oh, I want to do that, I want to try that, and like we get excited when something happens. We're like, oh my god, like look at this, look what's happening here. And it's one of those things. I hesitate to call a game perfect, but it's one of those things that, like, the idea to the execution to the artwork to that sort of that singular song to the way it all bounces to the variety to the la 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 la, everything just goes together so well that this is perfect.
I'm with you. I think that, like, again, right, like, except the caveat that literally nothing is perfect, and that's an annoying thing to point out when someone's trying to judge something, right? It's like 10 out of 10 doesn't mean perfect, right? It means a masterpiece. And it's like, but I would go out on a limb and say that, like this is as close to perfect as you get, right? Some things just fucking work. And the whole package of Balatro just works. It's a game that is like, I think, very easy to pick up and play, and like reveals its depth to you as you continue to play it, and you will get as much out of it as you put into it. And yeah, it's just like I said, it's infinitely replayable. I would recommend it to anybody. I think it's one of those games that like, it's an all-timer, and it's super cool to see something developed by a solo developer like just light the world on fire like this, right? Like that's such a huge W, and it's like one of the things that makes this industry so exciting to watch, and I think so unique from every other art form, is that like I think the gatekeepers, like the audience is the gatekeeper. The cream rises to the top. There are so many great games that don't get the attention they deserve. Obviously, that's true. But when you see a game like this that came out of nowhere and was just like through sheer word of mouth, right? It was just like, it was a movement, and it got to the Game Awards. Like, that's awesome. What an achievement, and so well deserved.
Yeah, it's a rarity. It feels like the only other game I can think before this that was really spread in the same way, Stardew Valley, like that came out and it was like it spread through word of mouth, oh shit, you need to try this, you need to get on this. And like
Undertale is the other one that comes to mind, but it's again
life-changing games. Undertale, I think, had
masterpieces,
the benefit of
10 out of 10s, right?
Yeah, Undertale had the benefit of people were excited about it already because Toby Fox had already sort of done his Earthbound hacks or whatever, and that was sort of like a continuation of that. I feel like Balatro came out of absolutely nowhere.
I don't think the developer, the publisher, any of them expected it to fly as it did, and it deserves it. It is an absolute masterpiece. You're right.
Yeah, absolutely. Just driven by an idea, and so impressive. I guess it's my number 2 now. Then, even though we know we're number 1, so
my number 2.
Oh, sorry, Steve. Yeah, sorry, Steve. Go on. What's your number 2?
My number 2 is Indiana Jones and the Great Circle.
Yeah.
Basically echo what Pete says. It feels like this is an Indiana Jones game that I've been waiting for, in the same way that this is also an Indiana Jones movie that I've been waiting for. The other ones that they've done since the trilogy are trash, and nobody should watch them, in my opinion.
This is the 4th Indiana Jones movie now.
The 4th Indiana Jones movie that they should have made, and like to the point where you can play this in cinematic mode, and it looks like you're playing a movie, and it's like letterboxed, and it's really fucking cool. There's just so much about this game to love, and I don't want to spoil anything about the story. I think it's just an absolute blast from start to finish. And like, it's just the world that you explore is so cool. The areas that you kind of explore and you learn and you figure out, and you're like, oh, that's that place over there that I've been to before that I need to get back to. And like you don't really have fast travel. The only way you can fast travel is by going to a signpost. It like forces you to move around the areas in ways that most games don't, that you don't really have to learn the buildings or the areas that you're in, and I really like that. And there's just a lot here. Like, if you're an Indiana Jones fan, this is a must play, in my opinion. But even if you're not, and you just really like adventure games, you like stuff like Uncharted
pulp as a genre,
then I think it's worth playing. There's things I think could be improved. I don't think this is by any stretch a perfect game. I think it's a high 8 for me. I think the combat could do with some improvement. It feels a little bit clumsy at times for me. Like, it feels like the enemies are just in the way, and I can always battle my way through them, and they're just like sticking points. And I kind of feel like a little bit more risk could be put into the mix. I never felt like I was at danger, that I was going to die, that
it's
I
funny,
was had an issue.
I didn't have that problem because I didn't aggressively go after the collectibles like you did. So there were times where I was like, not like ever underpowered to the point where I couldn't do something, but where it was like, ooh, I got to think about this because like I don't have the resources to just fight all these guys.
Yeah, see, I can punch the shit out of them. I had like the things where you can like maximize the health. the hat thing. So like when you do die, you just pick your hat up and you can just
I had that.
attack again. There's like so many things that you pick up. Like I think maybe that's the problem. Maybe I just kind of min-maxed to the point where it's just like, oh,
you were just like OP,
out my way out of everything. Like, that could be my fault. Like that's like you're meant to play the game. But I think that's testament to it though, like the fact that I felt like I wanted to go and get all the collectibles. That's a rarity for me.
Yeah.
I'm not the kind of person that goes through a game and it's just like, I want to go and get everything. I want to make sure I get all the trophies. I want to make sure I do this. Like I did feel like I wanted to do that, and I bought the little map things, and I bought the books, and I found everything, and like every single thing was. But it felt like I had to solve this challenge to figure out how to open the safe to get the thing that I wanted inside there. Like all of that stuff, I feel like was really cool. Like I felt like there was a little bit of a reward for solving things, which I liked. But yeah, absolute must play in my opinion if you're an Indiana Jones fan. But I recommend it for everyone.
I feel like neither of us really said this. I thought the puzzles were really good too.
Yeah, they're really good. Puzzles are really good. Yeah.
I like puzzles, but like annoying puzzles really turn me off. You know, like when they feel like obtuse and it's like it doesn't feel like it's like naturalistic. It feels like very like when you get in that
the
like,
way they did it with the camera as well. Like if you need a hint, you can take a picture and he'll like read it out and
it was like degrees of hints too, right? Where it's like if you got one hint, like it was like the third hint would be the solution, and it's like great. So it's super easy to be like, oh, okay, I'm oriented now. Let me solve it, right? And you didn't feel like you had let anything, it didn't feel like you were cheating. It's just like it kind of nudges.
Yeah, it's not like
you.
I'm going online on Game Facts, like back in the day, and like reading through a walkthrough written in like typewriter font.
Like it felt like it was like a good job of being like, look at that statue. And it's like, oh, okay, great, cool. Yeah, that's the first thing I need to interact with. Awesome. Like, and it sets you there really, really simply. Yeah. So
that's the thing I did as well. I got all the pictures because I wanted all the skill points so I could read the books every single time. I'm like, oh, this is a cool picture. Let's take this snap.
I did that too. I thought that was a fun mechanic. That was like a nice collectible.
Yeah.
Yeah, great game. I'm eager for a follow up for sure. I think, like you said, like there are definitely like systems to be built on. But yeah, I think the foundation there is really strong.
Mm-hmm. Max, what's your number 2?
Sorry, now here's my number 2. My number 2 is Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. This is a game that I think opposite to Balatro, where Balatro was a game over one person that came out of nowhere and blew everyone away. Just so good, word of mouth spread, and it really hit. This I feel like had the opposite thing where the game came out, it was really, really good, and it had been marketed quite heavily, but no one played it. I don't think it found its audience. I don't think it hit. We know that the team has been sort of disbanded and moved on to other things. We know that this game is probably not going to get a sequel. It didn't sell as well as it probably could have done. However, this is incredible. They did. I wrote a review before where I said, you can sort of become quite disillusioned with Metroidvania as a genre now, where it's it's had its peak of like a lot of the games that come out are good, and now it's like a lot of the games that come out are wanting to be good, but some of them aren't. There are a lot of clones of like Hollow Knight, or they're all sort of 2D Souls likes, blah blah blah. Whereas this just did enough different and separated itself from the bunch. In like it was just so well made with the combat and the traversal, and the power-ups were really unique. It had great personality, it had good visuals, it ran really well. It's sort of like they were targeting the Switch. It was just sorry, I've lost my train of thought here. It was just fantastic. It was just so well done. And I think it's a shame that
it's a one and done.
We're not going to see. It's a one and done. We're not going to see any more of this. The DLC was fun.
Pete's prediction comes true, and Ubisoft flogs it all.
That would be nice. That would be nice.
It could happen.
It would be good if Ubisoft collapsing would mean that we get more Prince of Persia. I just think it was one of those things that people were ignoring the fact that what we'd seen, the Sands of Time remake, it looked bad. What we'd seen at that point looked terrible. It had been in like the hands of 3 different developers. It looked awful, but this was coming out because it wasn't what they wanted, which is a remake of a 20-year-old game at that point. They looked down on it negatively. They didn't want to know. They just weren't that interested in it. Whereas I think that's a shame.
I don't think it's necessarily even just that. It's like Ubisoft did a terrible job of marketing it, and they did a terrible job of explaining that this doesn't replace the Sands of Time. This is something different. This is new. We've doing something cool, but they do a terrible job at marketing most of their games. Like unless it's a franchise that you're already deeply ingrained in, I don't feel like you would ever really have any desire to pick them up or even hear about them. You just be like, oh, there's another one. Cool. If I'd heard, oh, there's another Prince of Persia game, I wouldn't think it was this. I would imagine it was something like Sands of Time, because that's the Prince of Persia game that's like ingrained in my head when I grew up. That was the game that I played. But this has been on my list, on my wish list for a while to pick up. I would like to play it. It's just been kind of finding time, and you're the only person I know that has played this game and has spoken highly of it.
There's a few of us that have played it, and we all agree that it's fantastic, but try as I may to get people to sort of want to get involved in this game, and this is easily top 5 all-time Metroidvanias, easily, easily, up there with Hollow Knight, up there with the Metroids, blah blah. This is fantastic, and I played through the DLC and was reminded, this is like the start of this year, 20 days ago, and was like, yeah, this really is good. And I rebought it on Steam so that I could have an excuse to play it again at some point. But then all my save files carried over, and I was like, oh well, I guess I'll just play the DLC then and go back to it another time. But this is so special, and it's one of those ones that I played at the start of the year, and at no point did I ever have any question that this would not be sort of up there at number 1. And I think if Balatro didn't come out, this would have been my number 1 game of the year. Absolutely.
Okay, spoilers.
Well, I'd already said it.
There's one game left. Ago. He's like, oh, that's my number 1. It's like, do you have to say that yet? Yeah, I'm glad to see that, man. I know you really enjoyed this one, and like, it's cool that it stayed so top of mind considering it came out so early in the year. It's a shame that the studio obviously had a unfortunate end there. But
yeah.
Okay, so number 2 for me. So my number 2 is Metaphor Refantasio, which is the new Atlas joint. I think there's a chance this may have taken the top spot for me if I had enough time to finish it. I am 60 hours in right now, and I am like rounding the corner. Like I'm kind of like heading into the end of the game. And it's the most I've enjoyed a turn-based RPG since Persona 5 Royal, which I think is really high praise for it. Obviously, y'all know I'm a big fan of a good turn-based RPG. I played a lot of them in the last couple of years. And I think it's got a really, really memorable and like lovable cast of characters. I really like the main crew. And I think that the story and the themes that it explores feel very topical. It's a very timely piece, right? Like the kind of whole conceit of the story is about how society grapples with racism and inequality, and how racism like impacts things like poverty and like a people's, like a cultural group's ability to thrive, and it is doing a really good job of, I think, engaging in those in a way that is like very show not tell. Like it doesn't feel like it's sitting there like trying to like sway your worldview or something like that, right? Like I feel like people always talk about how games have an agenda, right? Like when they engage with certain topics, and this game very much has an agenda. Which, to be clear, most art has an agenda. It's a stupid thing to say. Just want to be clear about that. It's a dumb criticism for any piece of art. But point being, it is very much capital AS about something. And it does that in a really human way. right? Because of the fact, and like framing wise, it's very familiar if you're a Persona fan, right? Like it has the calendar framing device where it's like you're managing non-combat time, right? Through like interacting with characters, raising your social stats, stuff like that, so that'll influence the combat stuff later on, and story. And it does, I think, the smartest thing that a video game or like any novel or any like piece that doesn't have to be as concerned with time, right? And being like super judicious by telling you a lot of the information about the world through characters, right? So it's like, oh, like this social group exists, right? And like there's like 9 races in the game, right? And the way that they'll teach you about a cultural group is by like having a member of that group be in your party or be a main character, right? And rather than getting into like some of the kind of dialogue I was criticizing Dragon Age for, of like info dumping and explaining things, which it's a Japanese game, so it does plenty of that. It does a really good job of like making you engage with the themes of the narrative in a way that's like very personal, right? And very rooted in like people's struggle and like people that right? And like it does a very good job of like making those things not abstract and like really making you sit in and like ruminate on some of the themes. And I think I really love that. And it has a lot of layers to the narrative. Like there's a lot of interesting mysteries that I am still in the process of uncovering. And obviously, remains to be seen on, I guess, like how some of those things play out, right? And whether or not I'll find all of the reveals satisfying. But I'm like so engaged in the narrative and the like what is happening, to the immediate characters that I'm like engaged with on like a personal character level, but then also kind of like sociologically and like what is the overall direction of like where this world is headed, as like it's like the entire thing is like about like a governmental collapse of this like kingdom and like the end of the monarchy and like there's so much. I could talk about this game for so long. And there's so much there to chew on, and it's one of those games. It's like since I started it, it's just like I'm thinking about I want to see like one of the companions, right? I'm like, how is his story gonna play out? Like, he's been on this big emotional journey. Like, what is the resolution of that? But then also like the really broad stuff of like how what is the source of magic in this universe? And is like I have a theory that I don't want to say because I think it's fine. Yeah, I really love it. It's really great, and I think my criticisms for it are few and far between. It is, I think, familiar to Persona in a way that is positive. I think like the calendar system, like all the social bonds, all that stuff is good, and those mechanics are super well developed, and I think like borrowing from those was smart. The changes to the combat I think are really cool. It has like a class system rather than like having the Persona fusion and everything, so it's like very much it's like a lot like Final Fantasy like Tactics or something like that, where it's like you have a character who's a certain archetype and then you max that out, and then you can like mix and match abilities based on like the social bonds that you have. So if you like max out the relationship with the character that like unlocked a certain ability, you'll be able to like inherit like 3 other abilities from another class. So you can have these really cool like hybrid classes where it's like I have this character who's like in a defensive like they're like a tank, but they were like a cleric before, so like they have all these like buffing abilities and stuff like that too. So I can have them kind of like just sit there and take hits and like power up my attacking characters and stuff like that. So it's really cool how much control it gives you over like your party makeup and stuff like that without needing you to like get into the like Persona breeding stuff that gets really deep and weird and like it requires a lot more effort for you to get the maximum result, whereas this I think is like a little bit more encouraging for you to like experiment and be creative and like just see what works rather than like feeling like there's kind of like a quote unquote like optimal way. I'm sure there is, but I'm having fun experimenting rather than feeling like, let me look up a guide so I can get the mathematically best thing so that I'm not struggling late game or whatever, which I really like. And the only stuff that I feel like hasn't worked for me is like there's like tiny little things that feel like weird steps back. Like there's no romance options in the game, which is like a thing that like, you know, not a huge part of Persona, but it's something that's like always kind of been a part of it. It's not, you know, it's pretty par for the course in this genre.
So it's like, is that in Shin Megami Tensei, the romance stuff, or is it just Persona?
I think it's just Persona. And again, it's like it's not not like the most important thing, but it is one of those of just like, why wouldn't you give me the option, right? Like when it's something that could deepen the experience. And then there's also like little things where like the fast forwarding system that exists in Persona 5, where it's like, you know, if you enter into a battle, you can like press start and it'll just like all the characters start auto attacking.
Yeah, I love that.
And you can use it to like skip like little animations at certain parts where it's like, oh, you're going through a door and you like move a little bit quicker. And it's like, that just doesn't work in this game. Like the fast forwarding only fast forwards text. And it's like, that's the part I want to see. I want to skip the part where I'm opening the chest, like, or whatever, right? And it's like little goofy shit like that where it's like, this feels a little worse than it did in Persona. Why?
No, I feel like you had the benefit of playing the
better version,
the good version of Persona.
Yeah, right.
We had to go through some of that wonky stuff with the first version of Persona 5. So I would imagine with like Metaphor Refantasia R or whatever, it's going to come out and it's going to be probably tidy up all this.
I think you're exactly right, and I think that's the thing of it. And I like Persona enough now that those things are fine. Like they're whatever. But yeah, it's like those are the things that are not working for me. It's literally nothing that has to do with like the core identity of the game.
You know, it's a solid game if you're nitpicking tiny little details there.
Exactly. Yeah. And I genuinely think if I had rolled credits on it and I was able to get into, you know, some of the kind of like resolution of some of these like emotional beats that I've been talking about, I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up being my number one. But yeah, that said, it's like, it was neck and neck. So fantastic game. If you're a Persona person, I hope you've already picked it up. Because otherwise, what the hell are you doing? You're missing out. And if you're not, if you like turn-based RPGs, if you like swords and sorcery fantasy, if you have heard good things about Persona, but, you know, like never jumped in, I think this is one of like, if not the best game of the year, it's obviously one of the top 3. So I couldn't recommend it more highly.
Well, I think the best game of the year is Balatro, Max. What do you think? Do you think it's the best game of the year?
Concur. I think it's the best game in the last few years, to be honest.
Me too. I think it is absolutely phenomenal. I echo what Pete said, but like, oh my God, talk about giving you the toolkit and then making you feel so smart for figuring out how it all pieces together. It's like they've given you a set of Meccano without the instructions, and you piece it together, and then you get through it, and you're just like, holy shit!
Am I a fucking genius?
I'm actually a genius.
Synergies you didn't even consider until like you have all the cards in hand. You're like, oh wait, that bounces off that and then does that, and then if I put that there, oh my God, then it all just
and then you're like,
so good at giving you aha moments like that, which is like so wild for like the type of game that it is. It's like, you know, it's weird that it's like it's kind of a puzzle game sometimes, you know. It's like
it's 100% a puzzle game. Yeah. It's and like I always hit myself when I'm like not looking at what and I've not checked like the jokers and stuff. Like I've had like an incredible run where I would have got through and I would have like probably, you know, gone all the way, and I get to the boss and it's just like, oh shit, okay,
it all crumbles because you miss one.
Yeah, it's like spades are debuffed and like you know,
great.
it's like great because that's what I was relying on, or like I can't play my most used hand.
Yeah. It's all and it's a good in that way that it like. You have to consider what's next. You know, you can't just go on, I've got this perfect thing, because something can trip you up. You know, something can, I'm relying on having loads of money and the cards bouncing off that. If I play the hand I need to play, I lose all that money. Shit, I need to quickly think about something else, or, you know, what else can I do? It's just, it's so impressive. I had a friend when it was sort of like had just come out and I was playing it on docked Steam Deck on the TV, hours and hours and hours at a time. A friend of mine came to pick something up off of me, and he was, oh, yeah, I'll stay for a bit and I'll have a drink. I was like, oh, here's this new game I'm playing called Balatro. And I was playing about an hour. He sat and watched me for like an hour, and he was like, dude, I just watched you look at the same screen for an hour. Nothing has changed on the screen. It's just the same. And it is. It's so simple how it's just the exact same. Like, there's this bar on the side.
But, you know, like
this
when
bar
you
on the
figure
side.
it out,
you know?
Yeah.
It's like it only needs one screen because it's perfect.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like that's the same with a lot of games, though. So what you're looking at, you can be so impressed with how well someone's doing. Like I saw, you know, a clip of someone and they had like 120 copies of Jupiter in their hand, and like all of it down, and it's just like ding, 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 and it's just like the numbers gone bananas, and like of course they won.
Damn, I'm gonna go play Balatro.
You can show, absolutely. You can show someone a picture of a hand, and someone would look at that and go, okay, cool, you know, whatever. Someone that's played the game can look at it and go, I don't really understand what you're looking at. And then someone else can look at it and go, oh, that's genius. How like that will do that. Oh,
how have you figured that out? That's
the potential here
is
the potential here is massive. And you know, there are bits of it that are luck based, but a lot of it is based on what you can find and what shows up in your runs and how.
Like you can look at it and you go, oh, I'll do a 2-pair run then. You know, like I've got all the cards that are like meshing together to give me like bonuses if I play a 2-pair. I'll go with that. Or you might have it where you're just like, oh, I'm going to play like a face card run, and you want to get the card that makes every card that you play a face card, and you bundle that with the one that gives like the bonus for when you play a face card, and you're just like, oh.
That's always my strategy. Is like I try to have at least like 2 win conditions that like. Ideally, right, it's like they interact together, and like when there's no limitations, like they just pop off. But like when you hit that point of like I've been relying on spades and now it's like spades don't do anything, it's like great, I have this other Rube Goldberg machine that I already put together, right? Like I have this other way to eke out and survive this one round and then make it to the next wave, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I remember playing early on as well, and I would like rely too much on like, oh, I want to get my mult up. I want to try and like, you know, get my multiplier. And I'd neglect raising up my chips and like getting bonus chips or like increasing the hands that I'm playing. And like that's where the secret sauce is. It's like a constant balancing act of like the scales are tipping one way. I've got too much malt. I need to bring up the chips, otherwise the malt's doing anything.
I remember thinking stone cards were like useless. So why would I want stone cards in my deck? What's the point of that? And as soon as I sort of learned to embrace just playing high card, because you can just play one card and then a stack of stones, or just play one card and have all the jokers do all the work. And some of the best games I've had have just been play high card.
Every card that if you got the joker that's like every card played counts, right?
Yes. Well, no, the stone card it counts no matter what.
Is right.
So you just play one card and a bunch of stone cards, and then that's what 200 chips. And there are, you know, when I first sort of Stuntman, I was like, this, which is a card that gives you 250 chips, you know, per hand, but you lose 2 cards in your hand. I was like, well, this is crap. Why was this so hard to unlock? Why is this rare? When that card comes up now, I'm like, I want that immediately. 250 chips is massive, because all you need to do is play one card, work on your multi, and you're absolutely fine. You don't even need
dude, and
to
that's
play
like
anything, Bill.
That was like you said, like the pair and like high card. Like I do that all the time, where it's like even if that's not my main win condition, it's like, well, yeah, but then when you get backed into a corner, it's like you can play one card and
when they're
get like
blind.
500 chips. You know, it's like that's huge. You know, it's like it's so nice when you can. I love that about it. I love the way that it like encourages you to like think about the long game and how you're like how the different things you're investing in can like layer into each other, you know, over time. So clever.
So clever. And so like millions and millions of combinations, you know, no, and you can have those decks. Like I played a lot of the deck where it's all hearts and spades, and
love that one. Yeah.
And I'm just doing flush. But eventually, I was like, "This is actually well boring. Just doing this. I'm just going to play any old deck and just see what comes up instead of always going for the slam dunks." And you have so much more fun when it's just like, "Oh, cool! I've come up with this insane engine that I've made here, where every time I play this one card, it creates 2 copies here, and they like feed off each other. And eventually, I'm going to have like loads and loads of 9s in my hand. If I play 5 of a kind of 9s, all of a sudden I'm getting blah 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 blah." And yeah, it's you just it's just incredible. It's
special.
it's
a
my
very
game of the year
special game.
too, and I have no qualms in saying that.
Yeah,
Pete.
it's a fantastic game.
It wasn't your game of the year though. What was your game of the year?
Yeah.
Yeah, my game of the year was Astrobot.
Oh yeah, of course.
So I think for me, like when I was trying to like nail down what my game of the year was, right? It's like, I think pure and simple, this is the game that brought me the most joy to play in the year. And I think that like, we talked a lot about it when Max brought it up about like the thoughtfulness of the level design and like how much care is put into crafting these like small little moments and like how much it, like pays homage to like PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 platformers that were like so close to my heart and like a really formative genre for me. And it's like, those are all like levers that it pulls that like speak to me and my interests. But I think like, the thing that stands out to me is like what a lesson I hope the rest of the industry can take from Astrobot. Because I think like aside from Nintendo, right? Like you don't see 3D platformers get this level of budget and this level of marketing push and like this level of investment. And I think that like this is a prime example of how you make a AAA game with a smaller team on a smaller budget that can like really capture people's attention. And like, yeah, you're marketing to a smaller audience, a more niche audience, but like that focus allows you to make something that like can appeal to a broader number of people because it is so like, it has a distinct voice and personality. And like, if you don't play Nintendo games, there's nobody else making games like this. So like, it is going to be super unique to you. And if you are somebody that does love Nintendo stuff like I do, you're happy to see somebody else do it and get a flavor that's not Nintendo's flavor, right? And to like, like see that diversity of experience, right? In a genre that is like often neglected or overlooked from like the big players. And like, I just think that this game coming out and doing as well as it did and winning Game of the Year at the Game Awards and cleaning up, I really hope that this is a game that like makes an impact and sends ripples because we talked about
probably
this
will. But it's going to be in 8 years' time, right? That's when we're going to see it, and we'll be like, "Oh yeah, remember?"
But I mean, that's the thing, right? This game doesn't take that long, right?
Yeah.
The big games take 8 years. Think about it. They made Playroom at launch of PlayStation 5, and this is out now in 2025. It's only been a couple years. Like, I hope that that's the case because I think that like this game, rather than chasing benchmarks and this and that and all the things we usually associate with AAA gaming, right? Like chasing graphical fidelity, chasing like, bullet points for a marketing commercial, like, like Max said, right? Like wanting to appeal to the largest possible audience so it appeals to like nobody in an extreme way, right? It's like this bucks all of those trends, smaller team, smaller budget, niche genre, and look how well it did. And look how much they were able to make a game that is like dripping with personality, gameplay that's like easy to pick up, but has, I think, a hidden level of depth as you get into challenge modes. And I think a really strong foundation for them to build on in the future, right? Like this to me feels like their Mario 64. I'm so excited to see how Astrobot continues to evolve because it's like, they're 3 for 3 on making really creative, thoughtful, like joyful experiences. And I would love to see more of that from the AAA space and, not have to have that sort of experience be limited to Nintendo or indies that are going to struggle to get oxygen, So yeah, I would love to see this light a fire under Microsoft, right? With all the 3D platforming IPs that they own, or like PlayStation to, double down on these kinds of games and like allow, and not even necessarily 3D platformers, but like the genres that are not the first person shooters or the sports titles or, the games as a service. Like it's the stuff that you're like, man, they don't make games like that anymore. Right. And it's like, yeah, but why? Cause like, I don't really think that the appetite for any genre has ever really gone away. It's the market saying that it doesn't make sense anymore because of budgets from games of different genres. And like, this is the sign, right? This is the Sony's bitching about budgets for these games. How much did this cost? Right? And look at the return on investment and how the metrics for success are so much lower because you didn't spend $250 million on it for 8 years of development. Yeah. I mean, Astrobot is a game that I had so much fun playing. I 100%ed it. I would be playing the challenge levels if my PlayStation 5 didn't fucking break on me as soon as I beat it. But
I didn't know this. I didn't know your PlayStation died.
I'm so mad about it. I think this was a really exceptional game, and I think in the same way that we talked about Balatro being special, I think this game is special. And I think it is one that, if all it is the best game that came out this year, that's a hell of an achievement. I think it has the chance to be a game that starts a very positive wave through AAA publishing, and I hope that it gets the credit it deserves for that.
Me too. Yeah, it's on my list to play. I just never got around to turning my PS5 on last year at all. So so when I do, I'll play Astrobot. But I can now round up what our top games are.
Oh,
for
here
the
we
year.
go.
Final drum roll. Okay, what do we got? Number
Number
10.
10. Okay, number 10. And for 10.
Hold on.
Hang on,
Hold on. You cut out a bunch there. Start at number 10. Go.
Okay. Tied for 10th place.
Okay.
Pepper Grinder, Animal Well, and Windblown.
Cool. That's great. We each one of us yeah, that's great.
We actually have 11 because I couldn't figure out how to sort of tie. So at number 8, thank goodness you're here. Tied for number 6, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erd, Survey Scramble. Tied
Hold
for
on.
4th.
You cut out there again. What was number 6? Elden Ring and what?
Jackbox Survey Scramble.
Okay.
Tied for 4th, Metaphor ReFantasio and Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown.
Cool.
Number 3, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Number 2, Astrobot. And number 1, Game of the Year, is Balatro.
That's a great top 3.
That's a great top 3.
Yeah, Balatro, Astrobot, and Indiana Jones. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Great cross-section. 2 of the big console manufacturers both got a game on there. And 3 totally different games from different genres. I love that.
Now, does anyone else feel the distinct lack of Nintendo this year? I've one game, and it was sort of only number 6, so it didn't fit in. Can I quickly, actually, while I remember, my honourable mentions, I've just got to say, this last year was so good for early access. You know, you got Windblown, like you mentioned, Hades 2, like you mentioned before. I also really enjoyed No Rest for the Wicked. It's a shame that we sort of didn't see much more of that towards the end of the year, but that's something I'm looking forward to playing more of. Deep Rock Galactic Survivor came out last year and really sort of like did amazingly. End of Magnolia, a sequel to End Lilies, which actually launched in 1.0 last week or this week, and I just sort of beat that 100% and got the sort of like all the achievements today. Well worth waiting for that one, but still, came out last year. What a good year for releasing like good early access games.
I think there was a lot of good releases this year. Like, I think broadly it felt like a quieter year because of how many heavy hitters there were last year, and like specifically how quiet Nintendo was. I think definitely contributed to that. But I think when you really get down here and you like tally this up, our top 10 list is 10 really exceptional games. Some really good stuff this year.
Yeah, agreed. Like, I'm very, very happy Balatro got to number 1. I kind of thought it would be because me and Max love that game so much.
Yeah,
there's no universe that wasn't. Yeah, there's no, because like even if I had like liked it a lot less, it's like you guys both had it at number 1. There's no way.
Yeah,
but I also had it in my top 3.
It was 11 points higher than Astrobot.
This might be the most we've ever agreed on a game. In this, that it was. Is there ever been a game that was in all 3?
Tears of the Kingdom, I think.
Oh, Metroid Dread. We would have all had
Metroid Dread.
Well.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I don't think we did. We do it that year.
We did. I don't think
Metroid
you
Dread
were on it though.
I don't think I was there. Yeah. No, I was. Yeah,
but we named it Game of the Year that year.
Yeah, great game.
Great game.
Great year for games. Thank you guys for joining us here for another Game of the Year. if you guys want to let us know what you think of the list, any games that you are aghast to see didn't make the cut, any games that you want to mention, from your personal lists or, honorable mentions that we want to highlight, I'd love to hear from you guys. I think 2024 was another great year for games, and we've got a very exciting one here in 2025 ahead of us. So I'm excited to see who's on this list a year from now.
Yeah,
so
me too. Probably a lot more Nintendo.
Probably a lot more Nintendo. I'm going to guess
I think
at least a third will probably be Nintendo if I had to guess. But we'll see. Time will tell. So remember, FlipScreen.games, that's the website. Go over there, click on some stuff, get involved, join the Discord, right into the show, listen to the sister shows, however you choose to get involved or show your support. We thank you for joining us here for another Game of the Year conversation. And we'll see you next time. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. He's been Max. We'll see you next time!